a couple of quite biggish items to come, I would imagine. So we're now on to item 8, which is the Community and Services Draft Schedule of Reports. And you will have seen on a separate attachment a new one come through, a new one of these charts with some changes to it, the order and content. So who's speaking to this? You?
Yes, Councillor Paula. Leanne's not here today. She's not well, apparently. So, so this is a first cut at the schedule of reports for the 2017 year for this committee. We tried to put it into particular categories: standing items, plan updates, strategic reports, policy bylaw reviews, and then annual plan LTP reports, particular stakeholder liaison reports like the one we discussed earlier this morning, the Road Indoor Rec Centre and those sorts of things, civil defence committees. And then there'll be a number of business as usual reports that come through as well. So, so this isn't comprehensive. There's still some work to be done on this. And the other thing we'll be doing is looking at doing this for the full triennium. Because if you see some gaps in this, you think, oh, nothing's happening in this space because there's all the white gaps and that sort of thing. The review may not be happening until 2018 or 2019. So if we do it over the full length of the triennium in future, then that will give you some surety that those things will be reported back at the appropriate time. Obviously, there'll be other items that get added to this as matters arise or reports are requested. So I'll leave it there, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. And we did have a discussion about that yesterday because there were some that, when the chart was put together, there were some things that weren't known to Democracy Services at that time. So they've been put in. There may be still one or two things that need to slide in. We're aware of. We see it as a flexible and iterative approach. Things will be given priority or pushed back by council through business. That's to be expected. But I do want to get a steer from any councillors. If you see something and you want to know when it's going to be covered off, or you suspect there might be some missing elements, then this is the time for you to alert us to that. But I'll take questions in the short term. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. I only picked up my copy of this morning, so I haven't had a chance to go through, and you know I keep lists for Africa, so when I get time I'll be able to go through it. But if I see something that's missing, do I just contact Lance?
Yeah, just put it through to me, and then we'll go from there. It's a living document, so obviously we'll update it as more information comes to light, or if we've actually missed something. So
but just a query, and I've raised this in the past. At Councillor Gallagher's Community Forum Subcommittee, the last one we had before the term ended, we talked in length about the Active Hamilton strategy, and I see the second line down under plan updates. It says Active Hamilton implementation status report. So that was due to the appropriate committee, which is this one, in February. So is that what that is? Because I thought that was a review of that strategy, and we actually, if you look back on that motion from the Deputy Mayor's subcommittee, we actually gave a little bit of direction on what we were looking for. So is that strategy coming back?
Yeah, so there's an update on the things that are happening, but you're right, there also needs to be an action where there's a review of that strategy, which was the resolution that you were talking about. Yeah,
because I think we saved it from the death throes of being deleted, and we had a really good discussion at that subcommittee. But my concern is that, and I've raised this before with the CEO, that there was a council resolution that said that was due in February to be reported back, and we're now in May, so I'm just not sure. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but when council resolves that they want something to be back at a certain time, we seem to be more and more, it just appears at some other time. So I don't quite know
We'll follow up on that, Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah.
We'll go through and do an audit to make sure that all those that are due arrive when they're due, or there's communication as to why they're not going to arrive, and make sure we're back on track.
Yeah, okay.
So I think in behind this will be the due dates, and I think, I know Councillor Mallett keeps us honest on putting in dates when things should come back, which we appreciate. I think it's a good practice to have, so that if there's an action, then there's
Yeah.
a deadline. And
I do too, but my point is that there was a date for this one and it's never turned up on an agenda, and now I see it's coming for June. So I just want to raise, there needs to be some clarity around that. Otherwise, there's no point in the governance wing putting reporting dates back. I think we talked about it at one meeting where the CE said perhaps it's something that might come up in his executive update report, at least alerting us, but
Yeah, in this case, I wasn't aware of it, so I need to go through and do the audit, and then we'll reset and
yeah.
recommunicate.
If you ever need to know resolutions, you just look.
Well, I was
I
just
have
gonna-
files, seriously.
You probably should have a resolution off with the governance team and see who's got the best
I
records.
keep everything. Yeah, all right. And just one other, just right down the bottom under strategic reports, the social indicator report, that's an annual report. Is that the ones that, is that a fairly new report, or is that the ones where we go out and take information from all areas through our, no, what is it, I guess my question?
yeah, so that's the one that we had discussion on about how we collect that information. I think what we need to do now is to actually make sure in here that we are clear on when
right.
we're reporting that back.
That's right, okay. And then supplementary question to that then, are we still doing the residence surveys? Because some of that information would feed into these. Do we still do
think
those?
Julie can answer that.
We haven't undertaken a resident survey for over a year and a half. We did do last year the quality of life survey.
Yeah.
So we did that, and that occurs every 2 years. We're currently in the process of looking how do we survey our residents at point of service, so we get a better understanding of what they think of the services, rather than the traditional resident survey, which is a telephone survey, which first of all cuts out a whole lot of people, and then there's no relation to actually how long ago did they use the service. So we're looking at that at the moment.
So that quality of life survey is, when's the next one due? I think, was it 2015, the last one?
The last one was 2016.
So, okay.
Yep, so it was just before the elections, and then we've just agreed to participate in the next one, so that will be 2018.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Leary, and it would be useful if you're aware of any other resolutions that may have slipped through the crack. With your fine attention to detail, if you could let us know, then we will try and get them timely. We are also going through an exercise of clustering focuses and topics as well, so there may have been some movement in a few things so that we bring similar topics together. But it would be useful to know that, so I appreciate that. Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, just we had in the previous term, previous to the last one, we had the Operations and Activity Committee that I chaired, and that basically did some sort of once-over overviews of the non-financial aspects of council's operation. And I'm just trying to perhaps balance from a governance point of view without, because getting you just to spend your life preparing reports as against getting on and do the actual bizzo of council, how that sort of, if you like, sort of checklist fits through these plans. You see what I'm trying out? Plan is a major document, and maybe that does cover it, Lance. I'm just very keen that we're across adequately a lot of the sort of the new and innovative stuff that happens, and maybe this list of, you know, plan reviews and stuff covers that.
I think it does partly, and the other part would be the next report in the agenda, which is our performance report.
Right. Yeah.
Although it is an exceptions report, so there's a whole bunch of other KPIs as well around our levels of service and what we've
And it's probably good to trawl through the resolutions, and I remember, for example, about 3 years ago, we had this debate about some land near the Horatu landfill, for example. There was some lots, you remember, and they were going to sell them, we stopped that. But long term, we wanted to revisit a potential sort of recreation dog park type reserve, subject to the contamination issues and all of that. Would that basically be picked up in an overview of the open spaces plan, for example, as that comes through? We'd pick that forward-looking stuff?
So that's one of the actions, like we have those action plans that come out of some of these plans here, and then when we report those back, then we report those. But like we had with the older persons plan this morning, with those actions and the traffic light system.
Now, through the GM report, possibly one of the issues in terms of this is being in touch as a committee, you know, this is looking at our work schedule as a committee, we have the community networks, and my understanding from Andy and Debbie and the team was there'd be some kind of, whether it's a half-yearly report about the main themes coming through on that one. I wonder if we could just clarify that or get some feedback, because I notice now at those network meetings the minutes not been taken, but what we want as elected members, I think, is the key themes that emerge from those networks. Some of us go, like I'll go to the one at Western Community Centre when I can, along with Dave and other councillors and the mayor, but certainly very interested to be across the themes emerging on the east side, where I wouldn't necessarily go as a ward councillor to those. So I wonder if we, and it's just a matter of perhaps you might want to come back as to where we capture that, in my view. And the other thing is, if I may, just like to suggest to the committee, we did this as a community forum. I think we were a smaller committee, but we did it relatively successfully, because we were the committee that went out and about in the community. And so we went to the Settlement Centre in Boundary Road, went to the Western Community Centre, went to Taraho, etc. So I think if there are specific local issues, and I think symbolically, but also from a point of fact of mixing and getting closer to a community, I don't advocate council does this, but I certainly think a committee like this would be really good over, say, a year to have at least a couple of its meetings, in my view, or at least one meeting a year out and about. Subject to, you know, strong local issues in the area that you are meeting, and an opportunity for local people to come and make submissions, and it might be some other stuff you do at the same time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and thank you. You've had a conversation with me about that, and I agree in the principle of it. I think we need to look at how that might work in whether it's at the formal meeting or whether it's an elected member public forum that covers the responsibilities of this committee, which might be slightly different. But as you're right, we do need to reach out to the various sectors that we're involved in, and we've had a lot of discussion around how do we ensure that they're welcome into council in a timely fashion, and how do we get out to the relevant places at the right time. So, you know, there's some communities that we have seen, like we saw the Asian community today being represented in part, and we've still yet to have audiences from migrant communities and youth in any kind of substantive way either. So those are the sort of conversations that I'm having, and I'm happy to involve you in those conversations so that we can get closer to what you're suggesting.
And I certainly, for example, acknowledge the very success of the excellent community development type forums you spoke at as chair recently, and our staff, you know, are organising that. But it's just really, you know, just us maximising our opportunities, in my view. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. First question is, are we going to start the 31st of October meeting at 5 a.m? Because you've got 21 items listed on here for that, and that's without any other ones, because that's just plans, pretty much. So
Good question,
the slightly
Councillor
serious
McPherson.
side of that is, was that just, hell, we better put them on before the end of the year somewhere?
It was really before the 31st of October was the time frame, so then we'll have to go through this and actually balance the workload.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm hoping, yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I saw
the-
that too, and I saw the big white patches in the other part of it as well, so we've just got to do a bit of balancing there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the immediate thing we noted when we had our meeting yesterday, and which Philip was at as well, was there was this sort of big void of, well, where do all those substantive areas of interest, like the ferry bank plan or a sports park management plan and all of those things, where do they come, when do they come? And there was, given that we need to be across all of that stuff ahead of the LTP, because we're going to be making some priorities and judgments across those areas for the long-term plan, so we better touchstone with them well before. So they're just sitting there as indicative. They'll be done in a way that usefully informs the LTP workshops as well, if that makes sense.
Well, it no doubt will in the next 6 months sometime.
Yep. Yeah, no,
Look, some of
committed
those
to that.
could be a matrix table in the GM's report, because, you know, if there's a management plan and everything's going hunky-dory in all parts of it, where it's not contentious or there's, you know, nothing new, then, you know, that would be the report essentially. But there'd be other things where there'd be specific things that come through, or it's more live if there's actually a review of that management plan happening.
Well, so that brings up my next question, is where's the operational report from that? Because you say if there's nothing new, it might be just on a matrix table, but there's a stack of new councillors on here that have never come across those reports or those plans. They might have been to Africa, but they haven't actually seen this list. It's even more than Africa, you know. We need to get them familiar with that if they're going to have any sensible input, one would think. So, I mean, we don't, who knows what the Pooches and Parks plan does if they weren't on council at the time it was last discussed.
Yeah.
And half of us who were on council don't know what it does either. No, I just said half of us. You do and I don't. That's half.
No, look, I agree with you, and it is a conversation we're having. This chart, as you can see, looks quite a bit different from the one that went out on the agenda. So that those were concerns.
I didn't have one in the agenda, my agenda electronically. This is the first time I saw it.
Oh, right. Well, there was one. There was a foldy one.
Yeah.
But anyway, look, we take your point. I think you're right. And actually, Pooches in the Park was one of the ones that I said, where's that going to come before? Because I know there's some passion behind that for some people, and it should... Huh? Yeah, but, you know, it's something that, like you say, other councillors should understand what the thinking around it was. So, yeah, no, we're...
Yeah.
It's actually going to be a really busy 6 months, believe me, with trying to get through a lot of the stuff ahead of the LTP. But my goal is to have you all as well informed about those plans that sit under here as possible.
So I'm trying to help you here, and by saying the Hamilton Biking Plan annual report, why is that going to this committee and not the to the growth and infrastructure one where the other transport issues go?
I don't know. Probably because plans...
So I was hoping to help you by removing one.
Where is it? Hamilton Biking Plan annual report.
Unless you've got a separate recreation biking and commuter biking.
No.
I think that's where we need to marry up what's happening at G&I and what's happening here.
You can have it.
And with other committees. So that's a discussion between Mike, Sally's team and obviously the transportation team.
Okay.
So.
And the last question is one that I have raised with you a bit, Lance, is where would we have a discussion on community development and the placement of staff and things like that? It's not specifically the one of those plans.
Yeah, so a couple of places. We've got the LTP discussions coming up around the business we're in, you know, each activity area. So I think that's an opportunity for elected members to bring up those sorts of things. And what I'll also be doing is just carrying out a bit of a review of that area, and we'll be talking to elected members about that. And you know, Councillor Gallagher brought up, you know, about the network sessions that we have as well and how we report that back. So any feedback like that, we can feed into that so that they can become as effective as possible. And then elected members also, you know, you can actually give your feedback and give some guidance around the type of information you want, then obviously the level of service being provided and where appropriate how it's provided and what might be the most efficient way. So
do we need to bookmark that somehow, or does it just is going to come up anyway in the LTP discussions? We'll be given some notice. Yeah, that was in that chart that Julie handed out at the briefing last week. I think you might have been there. You know, we had the calendar of... I've been waiting for it electronically, Julie. Where is she? Okay. Yeah, so it's in there. I think it's July. I don't think so. July. There's a couple of briefings there. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's cool. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for those good comments, Councillor Henry.
Just some clarification. When will that's been brought up, I've brought it up a couple of times, but I don't exactly know where it fits in and when it comes up. I've talked about the glyphosate, the Roundup. When will that come up for discussion?
I can't recall what was decided around that. That came up as...
That was discussed at a briefing around I think it was called the Peter Winder list.
Yeah, but I mean, there's what's happening
Sorry,
now.
I wasn't actually at that briefing, so Richard might...
I'll take a note, Councillor Siggy, and I'll come back to you on that.
That'd
Because
be
I can't
lovely.
remember the discussion from, and I need to see Leanne, who's got far better memory than I do, and I'll email her now, and I'll come back to you soon
that's
on
right,
that.
it was.
Okay, thank you,
cool.
thank you.
That was the roundup question, wasn't it?
Yeah, Roundup, yeah.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Just on the plan updates, under skateboard plan, under Active Hamilton, age friendly, which is the third one down, we have just terminated the older persons plan, haven't we? As from the discussion we had this morning?
Yes.
So that now just becomes age friendly cities, is that right?
Yeah, which will get reported back later in the
Yeah.
year, which is,
Yep.
yep. So we'll amend that accordingly, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Just very briefly, I think.
Sorry.
Use the plans, and it's just like we take we've done the lake management plan, then we've got a kind of a 5 or 6 year list subject to money and budget and funding that rolls up, but just keeping a track on that. For example, I think there's been some brilliant, with the playground, the buildings, the changing sheds down by the veranda area, excellent. But I found myself as a councillor wanting to know about the building and was told by Sally correctly that I missed it because I didn't read the relevant chief executive's report. And what I'm sort of looking for is the interaction so that, the staff share with us, subject to the plan, sort of what they're doing, and it's not getting into the kitchen at all, Lance, but it's just keeping us across some of those developments and just keeping us, if you like, on top of the business, not just the financial parameters, but the actual things that are happening.
Yeah, and I think the report's back on the plans, then that can hit on
That's
those
the
key,
mean. I
those
think that's the
key-
means. Is that
those
right?
key
Yeah.
matters
Yeah.
that you need to know about or have input into.
Yeah.
And then, because they'll have action plans and key actions, whether it's water quality or buildings or whatever. So that's what those succinct reports back so would be like. A bit like the older person's plan this morning, where there's a series of actions,
that's it.
and then there's the commentary on what's happened, what might be the substantive issues, and what are the other decisions that this committee might need to make.
That's good. Thank you.
That's all of the questions that we have. So the recommendation is to receive the report and note the schedule there, but noting that the schedule will be updated, and we've noted the issues raised, and those will also be incorporated into any amendments of the schedule. Happy to move it, to get it going. Second, Councillor Henry. We'll go to the vote, please. Are we waiting on someone? Jeff, Mark, would you like to vote, please?
The motion is passed unanimously.
We know who you are, you see. Thank you. And that brings us on to item 9, which is the plan service performance exceptions. Julie, hi.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to ask Jolie to speak to this. Jolie is the person who puts this together and works with parts of the business to produce this.
Cool.
So this is the LTP Q3 results relating to the community and services. The exceptions are reported here, so only off-track, needing corrective action and no data measures in this report. Next quarter, the annual results will be included in the report and will also include the on-track measures. Any questions relating to the results in here will be directed to the GMs.
Thank you. Okay, we will take some questions. Councillor Bunting.
A couple of wee ones regards the recreation part, and with the pool numbers being down, what you're essentially saying there is that was an accounting, a reporting error, as opposed to real numbers, or?
Partly.
Yep.
This is partly of that. So there was an error found in the way it was counted, and the second part is that we've had a windy, wet, cold, cloudy summer.
Right.
And generally, if the pools and the zoo don't do well, the museum does okay.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
That's good. I get that.
that's pretty high level. Sometimes
Right.
there's other reasons too, and that sort of thing. So,
Okay. So what was the reporting, have we nailed down what the reporting error was with regards to the numbers? Yes, it was too high, but did you find out what the reason was and that won't happen again?
we did. It was just we have a booking system, and it's a bit like an Excel spreadsheet, and ended up there was some mix-up between the columns, the way they were counted, so...
Yep.
Anyway, we've fixed that now, so...
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. And secondly, Democracy Services, just regarding the timely and open access to public information, I presume these are sort of kind of late agendas and the likes, and I don't know who to ask this one to, actually, but what's being done to make sure that that's rectified in the future?
I'm not too sure what the stats said there, but I don't think there were any specifically late agendas. I think there were a few late attachments
Oh, okay.
that went out.
Yep.
Usually it's beyond the control of the governance unit specifically, and it's related to lots of various issues, but it would depend on which agenda you were referring to.
Okay. Yeah, no, it was item 11. It just sort of said 2 agendas didn't meet them. One was circulated under separate cover, but I remember one being a bit late.
Yeah, so I take responsibility for the agendas.
Yep.
So there's been some circumstances where we haven't got all the agenda information out, and they were discussed at the meeting because one or more councillors challenged me at each one of those meetings. So I can't necessarily recall exactly. But the governance group, as well as my general managers, are working extremely hard to ensure the agenda items are out. Some of them have been relying on third-party information to get the agendas out.
Right.
Some of them have been reliant on additional meetings to get the agendas out as well, in terms of decisions to be made at briefings or task force as well. So not ideal, but we are trying to improve, Councillor Bunting.
Oh, yeah, it's an endless battle, that one, but I appreciate what you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. I'll start with that last one. I had more or less the same points, slightly different questions. So number 11 and 10 for that matter. That's where the actual colour coding system we have is nuts, because one report doesn't go in time or an agenda doesn't go because it was missing one report, so it's a fail. All it is you might have an orange, but it's not a red, and I don't think there's anything legislative driving 100% there. So if we get 98%, I would say, well done, guys. Get the other 2% next time. Don't call it off track and put red bloody warnings everywhere. Can't we be a bit more common sense? We've raised this also at the committee meeting last week as well.
We have had a request to include a common sense measure. We don't know how to do it though.
Okay, but don't forget you don't have a lawyer as mayor anymore, so you're not held to black and white.
The measure needs to be reviewed as part of the 10-year plan, because these pick up the 10-year plan measures. So as part of the long-term plan process, and it was trying to be achieved, I think Councillor Leary tried to drive it last time for the 10-year plan process, we tried to introduce some common sense into our measures. A number of our measures aren't common sense. None of them are legislatively required. Some of them are our own devices that we want to actually review. So that's part of the work stream that you would have heard about last week at the briefing, is actually look at the 10-year plan measures, which hopefully will rectify this going forward.
Excuse me though, the measure of 100% might have been decided in the annual plan, but putting it as a fail when you get 98% red, I don't think that was decided at the annual plan. That's the staff means of measuring it. It should be an orange. I think you're allowed to put in common sense things without having to wait for the councillors to make a decision every 3 years, surely?
I like the angle you're taking, because it actually reflects better on me, Councillor McPherson, so I will progress with that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look, I support that, because there is a different approach in my previous place, and it had ones that were orange, where we're like partially complete, or wording to that effect.
Yeah.
And it was quite good, because you knew that you were in the 80-90% bracket, but you might have had a little oopsie, and that's life, isn't it? But people do see red like this. I agree with Dave wholeheartedly, and they go, "Whoops, you didn't do it."
Yeah.
Well, we did most of it.
Can I add, Madam Chair, picking up what was mentioned at the G&I committee, we are going to indicate which of these measures are mandatory on the next set of reports for you.
Okay. It's a start. The going back to the library, items 3 and 4 in these lists, I could see that there was some commentary there, but I didn't quite get a sense of the cause and effect. When we've closed the central library, how much of that business have we shifted to the suburban libraries, and how much have we left here, and how much have we lost, if you get what I mean? There's been, presumably 3 outcomes of the old library patronage not having access to the big libraries. Some have gone downstairs, some have gone to Chartwell or Hillcrest or wherever, and some have disappeared, full stop. But I didn't get, that's what I would have liked a sense of in that particular issue in terms of the notes.
Yeah. We've got an item coming about the Central Library next month, I think it is, or soon anyway, in the next few weeks. We were going to include that information in that, and you're right, it doesn't really reflect it here. And we'll have more narrative around that. So we've got some statistical information, but we've gathered information from the librarians as well, anecdotally, what they're actually seeing, in Chartwell Library and Hillcrest and compared to the pop-up library here. Yeah. Yes, it's transferred a lot of customers to those suburban libraries, especially on the eastern side of the river, and the pop-up library has gradually grown its clientele over a little period of time, but it's nothing like the suburban libraries. We think that a lot of people have actually tend to go to the suburban library who might have been CBD workers who used to go to the library here and that sort of thing. So, but we can give you those statistics when we come back with that report. That'll
be good, because the reason I'm asking it is it may give us a lead to what we need to do in the future.
Yeah.
The other question I had was also on Mark's list, which was the recreation one, number 2, and just to do with the pools there. And you've more or less answered it, Lance, but I would have thought that the weather situation through that time was the more important reason. That's what we've seen with variations before. Bad weather, they don't go to the pools, even though the pools are indoors. They think they're still going to get rained upon or something. So that should have been stated, should it not? In the
Yeah, I think your point previously around having the word pragmatic, probably more pragmatic descriptions would probably be more useful for the elected members. So take that point.
We should almost, what do they call it, seasonally adjusted figures. That's what the government uses all the time. We could have the same. If it's crap weather, we automatically downgrade. Anyway, that's me. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Number 6, which is the Waikato Museum Share and Celebrate Our Region's History, Creative and Diversity. The target looks like it's at least 8,000 children, is it? Is that the target? So it's targeted at children, because it looks like, or students, beg your pardon.
Yeah, 8,000 people coming to the education programs and extension programs over that 12-month period.
Okay, so that works out to 22 a day. Oh, it does. It's divided by 365.
Oh,
so
yep. Your maths is probably fine.
So, so we're well behind. Is that right? Because we're 3/4 of the way through. So 3/4 of 8 is 6,000.
Yeah, we are. A lot of this is
by half.
A lot of this is dependent on the type of exhibition, and things like Permian monsters, anything that's related to, like we've had the Da Vinci machines and those sorts of things, and also dinosaurs. Schools hook into those because it covers a lot of curriculum areas, so they can tick a number of boxes essentially, and the bookings are better. Those are quite often our blockbusters, which cost a bit more money. So what I've asked Sheree and the team to do is to actually really look at the programs that will attract higher numbers. Now we have some permanent education staff, and then we have other staff that we bring on if numbers are higher or lower. We can obviously casuals, we can use them when we want and that sort of thing. So we are flexible in that field as well. One thing I am doing is looking across my group, because we have education programs at the zoo, and we don't have any at Hamilton Gardens apart from what Wintec does. So I'm actually going to review the education programs we do, and can we be a bit smarter about A, how we market them, and B, how we deliver them, and looking at efficiencies and that sort of thing.
So in order to get the 8,000, I think what you just said, you said the things that attract kids are a bit more expensive. I assume, by the sounds, you've got to bring on extra staff, but I assume you might have to pay a little more to some of these things. You have to pay to. Do you have to buy your exhibitions?
Some we hire.
Yeah.
Others we do ourselves with our curatorial staff, working with our preparators who actually build them themselves.
Yeah.
So there's a mixture.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do charge schools a fee per child for that. And look, the key thing with schools is the travel costs.
Yeah.
So if they're going to travel, and they're not only Hamilton schools from around the Waikato, it has to be attractive enough for the school to be able to get the help, the parental help, and also for the parents to pay the transportation costs.
So nothing we can do is going to bring a school closer to the library or the museum, is it?
We have applied for grants previously where we subsidise some of the transportation costs for lower decile schools, and that's actually helped those schools to frequent those types of education programs.
Okay, I guess I'm coming at it from from the library and a museum point of view. These are wonderful facilities, but they're awfully expensive. Well, they're very, very expensive, and it just seems to me at first glance, that they are becoming less and less attractive to our community. That numbers seem to be dropping, and that's what it looks like here. And we seem to not be responding, in improving, or it's just not working. The numbers appear to suggest they're not working. So we either try and get better at it, which we have tried with the libraries. I know I was on the library working group, and we started hiring out sewing machines and weed whackers and things like that, or we accept that the horse is dead and we should stop flogging it.
So just to help with that.
And maybe there's not a binary. There's not a binary. We spend a whole lot more money, or we shut the thing down. But there is somewhere in the middle there that I suggest, in terms of bang for the buck that the ratepayer is getting, they are clearly getting, or it would suggest they are getting this experience somewhere else, either on their laptops or I don't know. I don't know what's causing it, but the numbers, unless there's an error in the collection, aren't lying, are they?
No.
So, Councillor Mallet, though, can I just not to put your questions off, because they're all very valid questions.
Yeah, I know that.
You'll see on the schedule of reports that we are expecting to see the museum strategic plan in August, which is a couple of months away. I can tell you that they've done a lot of work around what's working, what's not working, as to inform that strategic plan. And that conversation would be really useful to have at that time when the strategic plan comes to you, and then you'll see
Quite
it in
useful now, though, too.
Well, yeah, maybe, but I'm just letting you know there's a whole bunch of information underpinning the strategic plan that you don't have in front of you today, but you will have, and I just wanted to alert you to that. In the draft that is under work, and you guys will get to have a really good close look at that.
Well, that's fabulous, thank you.
Take your point, but there's a couple of things. Numbers aren't dropping at the museum, overall numbers, they've actually increased. And the other thing is, in all of these...
So in order for that, then we've obviously must have put up our targets, have we?
No, you're only looking at the education target. I'm talking about numbers per se at the museum. Okay. And our percentage of overseas visitors has increased as well. It's up to 21% now of the visitation. They're about 130 odd thousand.
Do they pay?
For various parts. So we have some exhibitions.
So visitors aren't treated any different than ratepayers, residents, I mean, in terms of going to the museum? Okay.
No. The other thing is the visitation can be lumpy. You can get, so you really want to look at the trend data rather than the lumps. And I think Councillor McPherson, talked about a seasonal lump that we get for the pool. So I think the trend data is probably more important. We've had other years where we've completely exceeded our education targets, and it depends on those exhibitions. So that's what Councillor Southgate's talking about, is how do we actually do better around our programming and that sort of thing, so that we do get the bang for bucks. But you're right, if we don't, the trend continues downwards, then we have to ask some questions about
Are we relevant?
Are we doing the right thing? Do we need to do it a different way? And look, libraries are changing, as we all know, and because society's changing about the way it receives literacy and information and things like that. So that's part of the strategic plan around having more digital access, having more e-books and those sorts of things. There is a little bit of a resurgence around hard copy books internationally at the moment.
Yeah. The 14% e-book target, it says the ratio of e-books to print books purchased. Is that how many e-books we buy in our library which people can get into? Okay, so it's not how many are used by our client, can we track how many people are using e-books?
Yeah, we've got all those statistics.
We know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the number of people using e-books?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It's been increasingly significant. It's increased significantly. The predictions are that will plateau. Everyone's saying e-books are suddenly going to be 90% over the next 5 years. That's the thing. It's plateauing. Probably better if Rebecca talked about that than me. I can't recall the exact figures.
Okay. Is there a reason why someone would get an e-book from the library rather than just buying it on Amazon? Or is there an incentive?
Well, it's cheaper.
Why is it cheaper?
Because we provide them like we do with a hard copy book, so that they pay for the library service through their rates. Sometimes for a bestseller there's a small fee, so that they take an e-book out like you take out a hard copy book. So there's not a lot of difference. So when you
take a hard copy, an e-book out from the library, do you only have it for a limited time?
Yeah, it disappears off your Kobo after 2 weeks or something like that automatically.
Okay.
It's like Mission Impossible, It explodes.
So if someone gets an e-book on, what sort of price are they paying for an e-book? I know that's a hard question. Couple of bucks or something, is it?
Oh, it's free through to the same price as a bestseller. I think we charge $6 for a bestseller or something like that.
And yet a person could buy the book on Amazon or eBay or something like that
for $14. Yeah.
Yeah. So and only the market can tell you, but I'd suggest there's better benefit in paying $14 to have the book forever than. And look, I don't know how people are going to react, but that would seem to me to be a logical thing for someone to do: buy it for forever for $14, or have it for 2 weeks at $6. So is it?
But you got to look at it from our supplier point of view. We buy books in bulk and we buy e-books in bulk too, and then we have a licence for a certain amount of lendings that we can do and that sort of thing. So I'd suggest that it's way cheaper for people to use the library.
Here again, I think this is all really good debate, but it would be better informed when it comes alongside the plan, which we're getting in.
So is there a point having this report if you're going to put it off to?
No, I'm just saying that you'll get a lot of more information to base your questions on. You're entitled to ask them now, you have, but I'm just alerting you to the fact that there is another opportunity to look at libraries in more depth slightly later in the year. That's all.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
My question is what Councillor Mallett's just said, and I raised this at G&I last week. I have some concerns about us pulling out non-financial performance measures away from financial performance measures, because we're not getting the whole picture. And I agree with, and raised it last week as well with Councillor McPherson around 1-2%. So are we going to? we did talk at GNI that staff were going to rethink this whole measuring system, weren't we? During LTP when that starts coming up, because there's no point in spending the time measuring something that's not going to provide us with any value when we have a whole lot of other things that we don't measure that would provide us with value. So we're going to look at a new way to do this, eh?
Yes.
Thanks.
Short to the point. Excellent. So any other questions on the report? And nothing to add to the conversation? Cool. Thank you. So the recommendations are that we receive the report there again, and that's it, just that we receive the report. Somebody move that we receive the report, please. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Bunting. Thank you. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Brings us on to item 10, which is the River Plan 1. There's a change from the recommendation that I'm happy to get onto the table. You've got it, eh? I'll move it, and understand that Deputy Mayor Gallagher is going to second. Right, that just to put it on the table. The recommendation can just go up so that it's visible, so people can contemplate it for their questions, and they can ask questions around it in the report. Not speaking to it yet, I'm just making sure that you're alert to the new recommendations, and we'll take some questions on the report.
Just a point of question. Can that be put onto our screens here?
Yeah, under discussion.
Yep,
Oh,
it is on there, yep.
Discussion.
Stupidly small.
Discussion and double tap.
Yeah.
No, you already did it.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, oops.
Oops, it's gone.
There it is. There.
That's it now.
Yep.
Done.
We can. Can you?
can.
You can
Can
scroll
we-
up and down on it. Yep.
Yes. So you've got the original set of recommendations on your page 59, and these are the repopulated set of recommendations that I've moved and Martin has seconded. And we're not speaking to debate on this at the moment, but I just wanted you to have it up there so that might usefully inform the questions you might want to ask. So
we can affect what's in here, unless someone wants to.
I've moved it.
You've moved that. That.
Moved
Oh, yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Can we agree not to have a seconder so we can talk to any changes first? Otherwise, we're going to have amendments.
You can still talk to it, yeah, because we're not in any form. We're just asking questions on it at this point in time.
To change it now will require an amendment, that's the problem.
So Andrew's
You can
suggesting
put
there
an
might be.
amendment at any
you
time,
might
or do you
think
want to
there are
take it off the
slightly better
table for
wording,
now?
don't you?
Really, the only point, Mayor Andrew, to put this up was just so people could see it, and so we're having.
That becomes the motion, we can't change it now that it's been seconded.
Other than
If
by.
there is minor changes.
Because mine change, other than with the agreement of the mover and seconder, yeah.
No, you can't, without 75% of the vote.
No, we can.
Small changes are fine.
We can agree between the two of us to an amendment, a small amendment.
As I know, procedurally, the mover and seconder can agree to take on and to include, so this is you can procedurally, the mover and the seconder can agree to incorporate. Then the other option, obviously, as we know, is then people can then move an amendment.
Okay, let's go to some discussion on the report, and you know what's planned. So, any questions, please?
Just come back to what Dave said earlier. Oh, sorry, was I next?
Oh yes, yep. They haven't got any questions yet.
Why are we naming positions instead of people? Why don't we just get people up there instead of positions? We've always had people, not positions.
Through the chair, I'm relaxed about that. I think the intent was to acknowledge that in terms of councillor, the chair or the deputy of growth and infrastructure and community services, these were the sort of, if you like, the major strands of work. So it was sort of the intent was to have either the chair or deputy chair from those two committees, but it's not a die in the ditch, and if the colleagues would feel more comfortable with just putting in Councillor Taylor and Councillor Southgate, I as a seconder would be very comfortable with that, Your Worship.
there's other people who would like to go on this as well, but it went up so fast that it's up there now. But there's, like Jeff, we discussed this at a previous briefing, and it was very clearly laid out at that briefing who was going to go on it.
Andrew, that was the safety plan.
Sorry, okay. So I know that Jeff's very keen to go on this and he hasn't had a chance to put his hand up.
He's
He
there.
and I have talked about it, he'd do that one for us anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
But look, Madam Chair, to keep it simple, but I think you can see the intent is in the suggestion of the individuals. It's been lining up with their work, if you like, their work in council. But I'd be, as the
Happy-
seconder,
that's
with the leave of the mover, be more than happy to go Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Taylor, Councillor Southgate, Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Let's make those changes.
Are there any Amish on the committee?
No, Amish.
Right, now let's take some questions around the report and the...
So can you put my name on there too? Purely, I am up there, am I?
You are, but
No, it just means that I get invited, whereas if my name's not on there, I don't get
No, it is,
invites.
but you're there,
Okay, very good.
the Mayor. See, the other intent, for what it's worth, whoever holds it's unlikely to be a coup between now and next year.
Oh,
Whoever
sorry.
holds the office of Mayor and Deputy Mayor are kind of on the committee because of the role.
So I'm looking at the one that was distributed this
sorry, it's
morning.
just
It's a
the
new
new-
one since. Yep.
It could be with the deputy mayor.
Yeah, we picked up on all of those things. Okay, so that's what it is.
Gardens are bleeding out
Any
there.
questions about the report, please, councillors?
Can we have a look at the bottom of the
Oh, can we
motion,
scroll up?
please?
Oh, yep, so that's an additional, that just allows for the group to consider any other part project or project. And that's arisen out of conversation with Mayor Andrew, so you're comfortable with that?
Is there any part of the central city not included in that list?
Do we even need a list, Blair?
Yes, we do,
Okay.
because we're
enough.
wanting to actually specify some projects that will be supported into the 10-year plan so that we can start discussions now with momentum rather than having to wait until the 10-year plan's been adopted.
That's the last bit in yellow, but what about the bits beforehand?
Why can't the working group deal with momentum and come up with, working closely with them, anything that group's comfortable with, instead of being specified a narrow list?
Well, I think that the intent of number 3 is to make sure that there is room for anything that's not on that list that still fits the criteria, and I support that. But I don't think I would support removing the list, because I think the list is indicative of what sits in the present plan, and we haven't yet got into the debate with the group and conversation about that. So we should leave that there for the conversation. This will be reported back to council on a regular basis. So, it's iterative, if you like, but we've got to have a starting point.
I think,
Chair, I'm just conscious that Gina was going to give a few comments
Yeah.
to contextualise the changes here and help explain some of those changes in the role of the task force. So it might be useful if we allow Gina just to cover that at the appropriate time, because it may circumvent some of the questions.
That's the problem when you come up with a pre-cut motion before we actually have the report discussed, to be honest.
Well, that's right, but this arrived at a discussion with some of the leaders last night and arrived with me in the morning, so fair to say. And I have been warm to making some changes that are useful to council. So let's have a little bit of context around it now, and then we'll look at the report, right? So, Gina.
Thank you. So the key outcome for this report is really to provide clear direction to staff around enabling the river plan to progress. And that's through both the 2017-18 annual plan and the 2018-28 10-year plan. And it's also for the approval of the vegetation management plan. So, as has been spoken about, since the report was finalised, there have been some discussions with the chair and some members around the annual plan projects. And it's proposed, as you see, that the resolution be modified to allow the task force to consider projects for the 2017-18 annual plan and make a recommendation back to this committee on the 27th of June. So moving on to the 2018-28 10-year plan, the intention would that the task force is not going to make the decisions, but they will help us prioritise the projects to bring back to council to confirm those projects through the 10-year plan. And basically we needed to start somewhere, so, and these projects really align with what Momentum and the Donny Trust have asked for. They've asked for us to complete a transformational and intergenerational project that connects us to the river. So this is where we're looking at the Ferrybank Development Plan as a main project for the 2017-2018 annual plan, supported by some other river plan projects, including some work on the Pukeri Garden Bridge and some signage and wayfinding through the central city. So those are the projects that staff are recommending. We are saying that that can be finalised by the task force, but we wanted a starting point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got those projects are included in it. Well, they cover it. That's quite broad, the Momentum email. You forwarded it to us, didn't you, Mayor Andrew? You forwarded it to us last night.
The points are no, because the report was finalised weeks ago. So the Momentum projects are social spaces and pathways to link the CBD to the river, but specifically are applied to the Ferrybank Development Plan.
So look, we can have some debate about that at some point, but let's take some questions at this point for clarification on the report or what's intended. Councillor Mark Bunting's
Yes,
first.
sorry, my question was actually more around the makeup of the task forces, and I don't want to break the flow of the meeting, so if it's okay, I might ask a couple of questions about the report at the end. But those task forces and the likes, am I right in that anyone who wants to be involved can actually rock along anyway to those things without having to be delegated to those things, or?
Yes, anyone can attend.
Yeah.
Now,
it's not.
It's a process point. Yeah, anyone can attend, but not everyone knows, and that's been one of the problems. It was promised early on in the term of this council anyone could attend, but if you're not sent a notice of the meeting, you won't know to attend for any of them.
I'll pick that up with the governance team, but make sure that everyone's aware of the timing.
Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Does attend mean speak?
So they're not formally constituted committees, so standing orders don't apply. But just out of respect for the process,
So I'm taking a question.
Excellent. Now I've got to lean over to the mic. They're not formally constituted meetings, so standing orders don't apply, but I'd suggest that we follow a degree of process, and that anyone can attend, but it's at the decision of the chair whether or not someone can speak.
Okay. And just to be clear, whilst the task groups may or may not take votes on things, those votes are never binding on a council. They are only ever recommendations to a council, aren't they?
Yep, and
or to a committee.
The ultimate goal of the task force is to nut ideas out.
Sorry? Nut ideas out?
The ultimate goal of the task force is to nut ideas out, get a degree of thinking together and bring it out to council for decision making. So,
but presumably the task force would bring a recommendation.
They can make a recommendation, of course.
Yep. Yeah. Which would have to have been voted on, or some determination of the consensus would have to there has to be some mechanism for determining what.
Based on the facilitative skill of the chair.
Yep.
So just to assist, the resolution, and as was written in the staff report, is very clear on the purpose. It's to provide guidance to the staff on the river plan program. It's to enable the staff to discuss the projects in more detail prior to being formally considered by the committee. It's also to enable the ongoing conversations. This committee, yes, and or the council in terms of the long-term plan. It's also to facilitate and assist any conversations with any third-party funders, such as Momentum, where there's a level of flexibility required and political engagement. So the task force would support in that. As to the number of members on the task force, that's entirely up to this committee to determine. So I guess Gina is just looking for an agile group that can give her some feedback in between them.
Obviously can't make a contract with a third party.
No, not at all.
Look, we've got a lot of work ahead of us with it. We've got another process on the heels of this one to talk about today. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. This is a way of expediting some of that, getting some thinking around it. Of course, people can listen in to council work. It's open to be listened into and contribute to. And of course, there's all benefit in getting as many people understanding stuff and on board as possible, because it will come back to the whole of council for a decision. So, you know, we've just got to be mindful of taking people on a journey around that. But Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Does the motion is not supporting any of these options in here, isn't it? So the motion's not supporting option 1, option 2?
No.
No.
No, it's for the group to start that conversation.
So the group will decide, and will decide how to prioritise those projects and what we can get out of that money.
Yeah. And the additional one allows for something else to be considered as well.
The additional what?
The additional, the Roman numerals 3 gives a little bit wider scope than things that exist.
So
already.
anything else that's already in the river plan, in the master plan.
I think just to help clarify question, Angela, so whilst the staff report identified option 1 in terms of the staff recommendation, this resolution puts that back actually to the task force to ultimately say what is the proposed projects for the 1780 annual plan, and those will be then recommended back to this committee at the next meeting, just prior to the annual plan being confirmed. In terms of the projects that are able to be considered for the 17-18 year, I'm also just worthy to point out in the annual plan consultation document, the river plan was referred to, and the river plan, the consultation document identified the Ferrybank precinct, the Puketi Garden Bridge, and the river path wayfinding and interpretive signage as the 3 areas that the $1.25 million may be applied towards. So that was what was consulted with the public in terms of the annual plan. So you are obviously going to be considering those submissions in the course of the next month. It's fair to say that there wasn't any significant submissions on the river plan, but that was just part of the consultation with the public as well. So that's just another factor for the task force to be aware of when it looks at the projects for 17-18 year.
So why is the task force dealing with long-term plan projects as well? Because when Gina bought the this 1.25 million, when Gina came to the briefing, and whenever that was, end of March, I think, the briefing was in this room, and the conversation was specifically around perhaps we need a task force to deal with this 1.25 million and the momentum money. I don't understand, and then that was sort of the end of the conversation. I don't understand why the task force is also wanting to deal with LTP. I don't know that that's really appropriate. I thought we've been very clear on whole of council dealing with LTP, and you put everything in together. So why is that there?
It's there so we could give Momentum and the Donny Trust a little bit of a steer on which projects would be supported through to the 10-year plan process, because we want to start working with them now to secure that money for a project. So, and also with the river plan, it's very broad in terms of the projects. They're categorised into short-term, medium and long-term, which spans anywhere between 10 and 20 years. So for us, we felt that it would be good to have your support and prioritisation of those projects going into the 10-year plan. So we're putting up the right projects that you support, and you know the community will support as well.
Just to be clear, Angela, the task force is not replacing the role of full council in the 10-year plan. So no. The task force is probably best described as helping staff identify and do a preliminary ranking of projects for consideration in the very first cut of the long-term plan. So it's not to replace the debate of council for the long-term plan projects of river plan. It's just to assist in the myriad of work that happens prior to those projects coming to the table. But certainly, if that's not the will of council, then it's not.
I have a real concern about that being in there. I don't think it's necessary. I don't see. I mean, yes, Gina, you've identified that Momentum want intergenerational things. Well, I doubt whether we're going to spend money on a park terrace or whatever the task force decides should be the direction, and then do absolutely nothing else and it becomes a barren space. I mean, we fully consulted on the plan. It's embedded in, I think it's embedded in so many other rules and regulations that we have here. Surely us just saying yes, we'll start with this is what the task force has come up with, surely that's enough for Momentum and for them to know that we'll be considering it with LTP. I just, there's some red flags here for me, and I'm not convinced that the task force should be doing this. I'm not, sorry, that was a comment, I guess. I don't know. Interested to hear what others think.
Yeah, so I'm trying to understand exactly the nature of, I think I do, the nature of your question. You're asking whether it is necessary to forecast into the LTP at this stage, but you just want to make short-term direction. You don't necessarily want to forecast. Is that what you're asking about?
We set task force groups up to dive into the detail, to deal with topical issues. They start, they do the work, and they disband. And anything that's bigger than that at the moment in the current environment goes to the 10-year plan. So why is this different?
So let's get staff comment about where this was derived from, because this came out of the workshop, right? This was council's direction, so we need to make sure that we are following the direction that came out of the workshop. Yeah, not the membership.
To consider the 1.125 capital.
So
that was it.
Look, I think.
So can somebody clarify how their recollection of what council asked for in that working group?
The intention, very conscious that we don't wish to occupy this meeting's time with detailed discussions on very detailed elements of the River Plan program, because there are so many elements to that. So the intention here of a selection of councillors to assist staff is just to work through some of the detail of the River Plan program prior to bringing it back to a formal committee or council for either the annual plan discussions or the long-term plan discussions. Very conscious that over the course of the next 6 months you're going to get into the detail of the long-term plan, but even those meetings have got an incredible amount of detail to work through, and it would the recommendation of staff was to have a task force, reference group, whatever you wish to call it, to just assist with some of the detail prior to it coming to this forum. Very, I guess we're aware that there was many different views at the council workshop in terms of River Plan and priorities. There are many different elements to the River Plan, and if you look at the appendix to the documents today, the number of projects and sub-projects are extensive. So we were just looking for a working group, reference group, to provide guidance to staff prior to coming to those forums. That's the intention.
Okay, so
for that, but also, as I say, I remind you, between now and December, the draft long-term plan for 2018-28 will be constructed and will be coming back in a variety of forums to this table. But again, the long-term plan has a number of elements, not just River Plan. So, conscious of trying to find that balance between the detail being discussed at the table with some information potentially being refined in the background and then brought to the table for consideration, but absolutely in the council's hands as to how you wish to deal with it. I guess our suggestion was just to try and manage the amount of detail before it came to this table.
Okay, so I think you have answered the question, and Councillor O'Leary can think of, and we can all think about that in terms of the debate and where we land on, but you've answered the question. So I've got a number of other people with questions, and we'll go through those and see where we land ourselves. Councillor Gallagher.
Well, I just want to assist in the answer too. The crystal clear intent of this recommendation is recommend the work program for the annual plan, which obviously the projects to be referred to are as listed, but obviously council will have a final say, one, in terms of the projects, and two, if the budget is there at the end, because that's the other critical part. In terms of the long-term plan, that obviously that's a working group getting down and doing some detail around the kind of projects that may land in the LTP process, and then look at number C, which is support engagement with external funders, and then of course.
So we're actually on questions, if you can.
Well, I'm actually trying to assist and to get clarity, because I think there needs to be some very clear clarity what this.
No,
I would, no, that's all right. I've finished.
I understand your intent to get clarity.
I've finished.
I guess the question was answered, and we'll get to that you'll get your chance to speak to that as well. But we're all trying to get clear here on what we're trying to achieve. Let's see where the questions land us.
And Madam Chair, I just want to make this in a very collegial, constructive way. This is one of the dangers I foresaw with the previous mayor, is that I think you do need a dedicated group. I don't know if it's external, internal, I don't care who's on it, but I do think it's really useful to have a dedicated group to bring back to council the micro details of the kind of plan with respect. And I think, anyway.
All right, let's try, we are going to have a full debate on this, I can foresee, but let's try and stick to questions so we can get all of our concerns answered for this part. Councillor McPherson, you're next.
Yeah, look, in response to the speeches by Councillors Gallagher and Bowcott, I would like to ask a question. Was not the intent when we first set this up to deal with how we would spend the $1.25 million and perhaps the Donny money that we knew we had in the bag in the near future? We had to decide what exactly on. Remember, and I'm saying background to that, we said, some of us complained at the time we were discussing the 1.25 million, what particular thing is it on? And we said, as a majority, we said we'll set up a working group to decide that. And now have we not now had stuff added to by staff seeking guidance for LTP? Is that not what's happened here? I mean, we've had a job added. I'm asking, have we had a job added to the one that was set up at council?
So Blair has said no to that, but let's...
So Donny indicated to us, and through Momentum, that us securing a project for 1 year was not enough for them to secure the grant. They wanted us to show commitment to the river plan and especially to the Ferrybank development plan. So through committing projects for the 2017-18 annual plan, we then had to show further commitment going into the 10-year plan. They know that that the 10-year plan won't be adopted until June 2018, but what they want to show is that what projects you are looking to support into that process so that they can commit their funding. They will not, well, the indication to me was that they would not commit their funding to us in 2017-18 when we only have enough budget to do one project.
Well, Madam Chair, is that not an unusual process for someone else, for us determining a course of action and a process to handle that? Someone from outside saying something which is I don't really see covered off in the report. Maybe I missed the reference to it. I'm getting really concerned here now. Who's driving this debate?
So no, they're not driving it. I think what Jean is talking about is at the workshop, the views of Momentum were clearly articulated to us. And exactly as you've just expressed there is what I remember you saying at the time, that, no, hang on just a minute, that what they were after is a demonstration of the longevity and scope of the project, so it would be transformational. I think the word that they used were, they were really concerned, because we did ask that question at the workshop, what will it take for them to keep their money available to us? And they said it had to be a transformational project, not a gloss project, not a quick, easy get project. It's got to be part of the overall. So,
well, can I have pointed it as a reference, pointed where that says that in the report?
I'm answering your question. Out of that, the staff worked on the recommendations from council at that time, which was to form some sort of working group, a reference group to advise, and that's where this has come. So, if you feel no longer that is required, if council feels like that, we'll have that in the debate. But that answers your question.
Well, okay. In paragraph 44 on page, I can't quite tell what, and the following paragraph, sorry, 62.
62?
Yep. It does talk about that part of it, but there was nothing in the motion here, and then we get this yesterday, and this is why it's confusing, because there's been a part added to it that has blindsided people. It's not actually referred to in the recommendation here.
It wasn't.
So there's a. Excuse me for asking, process-wise, are we being driven by what Donny / Momentum want here?
No, so
into a course
paragraph-
of action that was not envisaged even by staff.
Okay, now look, in 46 it does allude to that discussion
Yeah,
from
but
the
not
workshop.
in the recommendations that we got.
No, so the recommendation has input from Councillor Gallagher and the Mayor in terms of what they would like, and I had a discussion. I was quite happy to include that Roman numerals 3 and populate the names.
Well, I
Outside
thought
of that,
we were told, Madam
outside
Chair,
of that, no
that
changes to be
came
made.
yesterday that came as a result of an email or a message from Donny Trust yesterday.
No,
Point
no,
3, okay?
not to me.
All
no.
right.
The original resolution in point E in the report does refer to the 10-year plan projects to support securing Momentum Waikato Community Foundation funding. So it was in the original resolution. The only
In that
change to
sense,
that point is the addition of the other projects could be identified.
Just to clarify.
The other email, Dave, that you're talking about was just that the Mayor usefully forwarded on an email from Momentum Trust for us to, in terms of what sort of projects they were looking at, just so that we had the proper wording, right, yesterday, Mayor Andrew?
Look, I did see this, and I apologise, but I think we've got it wrong. The way I am seeing this is that we've got our $1.25 million to spend. We're going to try and ring in the $1 million to go with it from Momentum, and I think that's a task force's job to negotiate and talk and have an open dialogue with Momentum to try and come up with a project that will suit the city and suit Momentum, and that the 10-year plan and the spend out of the 10-year plan hasn't been decided yet. We don't know how much money we've got. We don't know, we can't be, and like I say, I was aware of this and I did approve this, so I'll take this responsibility, but I think we can't be planning to spend money out of the 10-year plan unless we're all together as a group, we're all a part of it, and how much money have we got to go around, we don't know yet. So you can't talk about projects for the 10-year plan when we don't know how much money we've got for it. So I think that this needs an amendment put up just to basically say, just spend the money that we've already got in the hand and try and deal with Momentum in this task force, would be my thoughts.
Okay, so the question that's been raised, and just to make sure I'm quite clear about this, I'm not pushing one view or another at the moment because we'll all debate it. The question is, if we pare this down to a little less than it was originally with the names in, but we relate it just to the 1.25 million or the annual plan scope, the reaction from the part funders will be what, do you think?
So their view also on this was that if we had some specific projects that weren't necessarily going to be 100% funded by council, but that you were supportive of actually being completed, then that allows us to speak with other external funding parties. Momentum want us to use their money and work with other partners as well to be able to fully fund these projects. So if we don't know which projects we're trying to fund, we can't go and start doing a little develop design. We can't speak to other external funding parties because we don't know which direction we're heading in. So this is not about saying you're going to fully commit to adding $12 million to the 10-year plan, but it's about saying we support these projects to be completed at a point in time, and then that allows staff to start work on those projects in terms of working with other parties and Momentum.
Madam Chair, just try and be helpful. I mean, I'm trying to write an amendment here, but I need to speak to some of my colleagues. So perhaps in situations like this, it's better to take a 5-minute break so we can...
Well, thank you for that advice, and I will shortly, but I'm also aware that there are a couple of people... I'm just trying to get through questions because I think people hearing each other's questions will help us get where we want to be, and I'm aware that there's some people who have been waiting quite patiently to have their questions answered. So let's do the questions that are on the table first, then we will take a pause, and we will do some clear thinking around this and come back with a resolution. Okay, so I've got Councillor Mallett and Councillor Taylor in that order. So you've removed? Yeah. So Councillor Taylor.
Well, this is a sort of quasi-question, I suppose, because I've noticed a number of strange sort of questions coming from over here, so this is my version of it. I mean, to me, what doesn't make sense, there's the question part, what doesn't make sense about having a task force deal with something that is as complicated as this? Because my perception is that there's so many little projects in this plan that the council as a whole can't see the wood for the trees at the moment. It is complicated. So what doesn't make sense about having a task force, yes, look at the annual plan, but also look at least trying to prioritise projects in some sort of logical order, because it's all over the place at the moment. So why, no one's suggesting, hey, we're going to commit millions and millions, but what's wrong with trying to prioritise at least and make it easier for the 10-year plan?
Okay, so that's a sort of
I
very
can't see the objection to that.
It's a very open-ended question, but you've placed your question now. I don't think more information can be brought to answer that. It's almost rhetorical, but that's okay.
Well, it's not as bad as some of the other ones.
Yeah, so, we've gone off course into debate a few times. We're going to take a break. That will allow you to do some key thinking over a 10-minute cup of tea, and then we'll come back and see if we can seed the wood for the trees and get something out of it. Going to make a start, and hopefully we can make progress. You have been in touch with, we've got new information, we haven't got new information.
Yep, so I'm not too sure what resolution's on the board now after the rest of this go.
Can you put it
Kind of Kararoa, absolutely.
The resolution that's on the board, that's the resolution that's on the board.
I think we're overcomplicating this. I mean, ultimately what we need is a task force to be set up to enable the $1.25 million to be determined and where it's going to be spent. And I also think there's probably an aspect of the task force to actually work with the Donny Trust and the Momentum Group to understand exactly what their intentions are for the $1 million. At the moment, we have got a really generous pledge from an external organisation that is a generic pledge where they've indicated an interest for something substantial for the city along the river. And I think the task force is probably the best vehicle, a stealth-like agile vehicle, to actually work with that group to actually understand what their needs are. So my recommendation, as a staff member, would be that Council considers a more simple resolution whereby a task force set up to spend the $1.25 million, as well as working with the Momentum / Donny Trust Group to determine how best to engage over the $1 million pledge.
Yeah.
And it's pretty simple. And that's not talking about the 10-year plan. It's talking, because the 10-year plan conversation will take away or carry on as part of the 10-year plan conversation where it's supposed to happen.
Sorry, I'm working on that now. I think we're going to be here forever and a day. We can all talk to it and debate, right? So you can still have your view on where it lands, but we need to get something workable off the out of today. The working party, the prioritisation of projects for the 1.25 million, and working with the Donny Momentum Trust. Those are the key points, right, Richard? So if we can draft something up to that effect and scratch the rest, it's wide enough to allow for useful conversation to go forward. And we can get some feedback on their views as how this dovetails into an LTP discussion off the back of that. But at least we've landed something, right? Okay, so let's put that up with a... So, and that's if you agree, you're agreeable, aren't you, Martin?
Very agreeable.
Good-o.
Very happy.
So do you know what's in and what's out? So that's all out. Are you writing it down?
We're deleting to make it work.
Yep, that's right. So yes?
Richard's motion, yeah. We did get something that was sort of like a terms of reference from, and I don't know what Andrew was apologising about yesterday's, but perhaps it was that. But we did get something that kind of had some parameters around the Donny money, the use of the Donny money, Donny Trust money. Will that be included? Is that specifically is what this task force is to address?
We'll be working along
the use of that money.
Well, I think it's
around
and our 1.25.
and the money we've already put into the annual plan for.
I think it's actually respectful to have a group of elected members engaging with Donny to actually determine what their interests are and to actually be a conduit for communication with this committee. So, yep, that's right. What I'm suggesting.
But so the parameters would be, and forgive me, intergenerational, significant with the sort of words they were talking about. So they didn't want it a toilet block.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to put that in our resolution because they know what they want. And we know what this committee, the task force, isn't going to have any delegation to do.
But don't we have to give some sort of parameter to that task force to say, within the scope of the terms of reference, loosely given to us through Donny, that...
That wasn't a terms of reference, that was just a letter from...
I know, but wouldn't that be...
I don't believe so. Because ultimately they're going to be running on those. If we don't agree...
Sorry?
I'll stand up again. I was hoping these mics wouldn't have to stand up. They're ultimately going to be running on their expectations, and it's going to be the role of our council to work with our expectations and come to a happy median in the middle. So that's the process. I think there will be a degree of negotiation here, but they've got great intent, and so do we. So I think we can achieve some good outcomes.
Okay. Okay, so if you can just turn your attention to the board, I think this is something viable after this debate. I'll take any simple questions for clarity, but we've had a lot of questions about the report, so we won't go back there. And then we'll get into debate. So Martin and I are agreeable to this amended...
Well, the finish date?
Aren't we, Martin?
Martin, it's easier not to second it until we've got there, mate. Otherwise it becomes really complicated.
We've already seconded it ages ago, so but we're agreeing to...
So what I'm saying is we can amend it. Leave of the meeting, we're amending our original motion. That we think better captures the will of the meeting at this point.
But we're agreed. So the good thing is Martin and I are both agreed about the amendment here, right? So we don't need to withdraw the previous one. We've got an amendment that we can hopefully all...
You got a motion?
Yeah, a motion.
If the word support engagement means undertake engagement, to have the mandate to undertake engagement, because that picks up
yeah, well, that's
to actually
that's fine.
To Donny Trust in terms of their exceptionally generous gift and other group, and then report back. I think that captures it.
Okay,
so Mr. Chief Executive.
Yeah, so council, just questions for clarification. We won't be taking any protracted debate. We're moving into debate very, very soon. So just for clarification, Councillor O'Leary.
Question for clarification, why does the motion say that the task force finishes on, what's been 30th of June 2018, it's an 11-month task force, and it's an annual plan decision, but you...
No, we're just getting that.
Just changed it. 17, Becca.
I can't read that. Oh.
Can you see that? Yep.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Councillor Bunting, your question?
Oh, just who's chairing? Not that I'm offering at all.
We feel the task force group can probably determine who chairs it. But
Are you kidding? You've seen this discussion we've just had? Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's go into debate if there is any. As the mover, I'll just talk to that. I'm pleased that we've been able to land on a constructive way forward, because I think the intent is to have constructive and useful debate how we roll out the river plan and how we recognise, as Martin has said, the extremely generous offer from one of our funders in the community. We need to get a win-win out of this money. We need to get cracking with some things to give comfort, the community some sense of achievement over the river plan. That's really important to me. And so in that respect, I'm quite happy to leave the recommendation as it is. I am going to watch with keen interest the debate at the long-term plan stage, because it is important that we create a lasting legacy for the city, not just a few discrete projects along the riverbank. And how that looks and where the priorities and the timing and the funding of that is all to be determined. but I certainly want to be part of a legacy project for this city. So that's all I would like to say on it in my moving comments. Councillor Gallagher has seconded. Would you like to make a few comments? Would you like to?
I'm happy to pick at the end.
Sure. So we're in debate. Anyone? Are you all debated out? Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Look, I'm happy to support the motion. I think we were, you were right, Madam Chair. We were, most of us were two sides of the same coin, but seeing it from a different lens. Certainly, I've been invested in the river plan since the beginning of time, it feels like, and there's nothing has changed my mind and my support of the plan, and Councillor Gallagher and I were right there at the beginning, so it's been a really long journey for us. I would be concerned with an outside organisation saying to us or sending a message to us, and I'm just surmising that, you know, in order for us to contribute to the city, you have to have skin in the game, when we have significant skin in the game because we have the river plan that was consulted on heavily. The open days that we had were hundreds of people, more than anything else I've seen in my 9 years. So if that, and there hasn't been anything to date apart from, you know, some views around the table, possibly a little bit concerned with the costs of the river plan, but there is big skin in the game, and I don't like to think that we have to simply put up another resolution that can be overturned at any time, because anything can be overturned at any time, and that's democracy, and that's the risks that we live with. But for me, the river plan is embedded in the district plan, in all of our strategies, in our policy, in our financial, certainly the current 10-year plan. It's been indicated in the future 10-year plan. I don't know what else we can do, and having a task force deal with the 1.125, getting into the same room, talking to people with momentum is a really positive way forward, and I think that the task force can do it. I don't really hear the concerns that some of the other members have raised at all. For me, skin in the game is that we delivered that river plan, and we created the master plan. It cost us $150,000. That's big skin in the game. So unless there was a fundamental change around the table, I'm really comfortable with the commitment that the city and the council has towards this, the future of Hamilton and the future of our river.
Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, and thanks to the CEO for cutting across some of the carry-on. I think he's earned his salary for the week. So do the same next week and you'll be on a winner.
Careful, he records all this stuff.
Yeah, I know. He's going to use it in the job performance thing. Yeah, that's right. Look, I didn't support the 1.25 million allocation, but that's how the vote went, and clearly the public expects us to get on with it and work out how that's going to be spent so that from 1st of July onwards things start happening, figuratively if not literally. So that's why I support this resolution. I'd say, to a comment that Paula made about lasting legacies, every lasting legacy I've come across in this council costs a bucket load, and that's fine, and it may be a priority, but let's measure that against the other possible priorities in the LTP round and decides how many bucket loads we've got and which are the biggest bucket loads that we should get underway first. So that's why I was uncool about us starting to look too closely at the LTP just in one area. Now we've got the order of things right, I think we're on a winner.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Paula. Yes, I'll obviously be supporting the motion up on the board. As everyone here knows, I'm a big supporter of the river plan. I want to thank the staff, Gina and Blair, for the report too. I'm very encouraged by the work being done and the possibilities in front of us. It feels to me like we're on the cusp of making a real tangible difference to our riverside. And even things like the vegetation management plan, you know, once the physical works begin there, I think people will start to see some real difference in terms of some of the views of the river that you can get. I think trees have been a problem for a long time. Fully supportive of the reference group. Obviously, there are some differences about its terms of reference. I think the plan desperately needs that, well, not desperately, but needs that type of focus on detail from the political wing. My feeling is it's also a move that gives some proper respect to the Donny Trust, given the extraordinarily generous gesture that they've made. So support the new motion. I have a personal view that we should be leaning towards more investment on Ferrybank rather than other parts of the river at this stage. For me, concentrating our investment in the Ferrybank will get us more bang for buck. That's just my personal feel. It doesn't mean the detailed design work for the Puketi Bridge is wasted. It may well be acted on further down the track. But I would like to see us focus on Ferrybank and show the public a bit of momentum there. That was accidental, actually. I agree with Paula. I hope that come 10-year plan time, the council does get behind the river plan. I also accept what Dave's saying, and I think the river plan has always been presented as a stage-by-stage project, and I'm just very excited to see it at the possibility that next year we're actually going to get some physical work down at Ferrybank. Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I can't support the proposal. I certainly acknowledge the generous donation and pledge from the Donny Trust, and thank them for that. But again, as I was talking about earlier on in the meeting, I just don't think that our financial position at the moment allows us to start undertaking these very, very large projects. Once this thing starts rolling, it's going to be very hard to stop. We at the moment, as I'll repeat what I said earlier on, a number of us were surprised, shocked, horrified when the actual financial position of the council was revealed early this year. But we were, a number of us, and myself particularly, was assuaged through that, because a lot of the stuff that we were talking about was subject to the decisions we made going forward. We have now moved forward, and it appears that we haven't learned anything from the position we were told about 6 or 7 months ago, which horrified people. All of these decisions are the decisions that will break our financial strategy, will cause us to bust our funding covenants and all sorts of stuff. So I'm very, very concerned. Yeah, and this is a really magnificent project. There's nothing that I'd like better to see in the city than something like this. But we have to prioritise it, and I'm afraid I still maintain you that our core fundamental reason for being is housing and prosperity, which is business and jobs and prosperity. So I'm afraid this thing just does not rate up with those things. So I will be consistent and will not be supporting this.
Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, I mean, this motion doesn't necessarily go as far as I'd personally like, but I respect consensus and the will of council. I would hope that this reference group could give some commentary on potential projects in future financial years, subject to budget, but the substantive work, I agree with Councillor McPherson, obviously will always be done by the full council. Number one, things we should always remember in historic contexts. Previous councils have spent significant capital amounts over the last 20 to 25 years on the Waikato River area, and you only have to go along our amazing walkways with some of those bridges you hardly notice as you're going through a river gully and all of that, to know that there's been a huge capital spent. We are carrying, or the intent for next year at least, is to carry that on and certainly build momentum, particularly around the central city, Victoria on the river, Ferrybank precinct. So I think this group is going to be able to get down to some detail with regard to that, and then come back, and this is the critical thing, come back to the full council with the recommendation, because the final authority in terms of what projects gets off the blocks, let alone budget permission, and funding rests with the full council. I think it's also very important that we do engage and start to build that warm, close relationship with the Donny Trust and other generous external funders, just to see what are the kind of projects now and in the future we can partner with them. And it may be, in terms of the 10-year plan, we will have very limited funds in terms of, we may be significantly constrained in terms of the funding and the capital that we can put into some parts of the river plan, which underscores why we need to build those funding partnerships. Why do people come to live in Hamilton? Obviously they have come to because they have jobs here, they can afford to live here. But if you actually have a look at some successful cities that we admire, cities that can be called medium small cities, Ipswich in Australia, Tauranga, Wellington, cities of medium small size, they are hell for leather developing their waterfront precinct, because they recognise that successful cities are places where people want to live, work and play, and any city with a bit of water, be it a river, a harbour inlet, whatever it is, develops that precinct. So I think this motion is, if you like, taking us along that track, and I would hopeful at the end of this we're going to land some really good projects and maintain the momentum of what I think is going to be, hopefully, over the next 10, 20 years, a successful river plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor King. Sorry, Mayor King.
And I'd just like to say thank you to Blair, Gina and Richard for putting this together and bringing it to us. And like I say, it got a little bit complicated, but it's not your fault. So there is 1.25 million that is here on the table, whether we like it or not. That's already been locked down and secured for this annual plan. I didn't vote for it, but it's there, it's to be spent, and we want to try and pull in the $1 million off Donny Trust as a part of it by beginning talks with them through this task force group and just seeing exactly what they do want. I mean, we're all aware, and Donny Trust through Momentum is as aware of any of us that we've got to come up with $30 million for a theatre, as well as a whole lot of other things, and there just isn't the huge amount of money to commit going forward in the 10-year plan. But I'm sure that's the skill of this task force dealing with Donny Trust through Momentum will come up with some common ground where we can make this work. So we're here. I am supporting this motion. It's on the table. It backs up motions that have already gone through before, and we trust that we will pull in this extra $1 million to actually do something really worthwhile for our city and for the riverbank. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Just a quick right of reply, won't take up much of the time. Look, the Hamiltonians love our riverside has been known for many years, and this conversation and their passion for the river, a debate has gone on for many years as well. And you landed the river plan with the community in part of that conversation. Yes, I do want to leave a lasting legacy, Councillor McPherson, and I agree with you. We have to do that with some significant financial constraints. So I agree also that we need to set priorities so that we get the best value for every dollar that we spent on behalf of the ratepayer. We are actually relying on partnership and funding support for many of our visionary projects that will come through the LTP, and these do need to all be considered as part of the LTB. I don't like picking winners and losers. I do like a strategic look at the business of council. I agree that the river plan provides a useful blueprint to springboard this discussion off. Look, you know, we probably all love some elements of the plan and are lukewarm or less than lukewarm to other elements of the plan. That's going to happen, and that's part of a useful conversation. I'm with Jeff on this in this regard. I think the focus must be on the CBD stretch, and we should be looking to get wins on the board by integrating other streams of work into the river plan as we go. This includes Victoria on the River, it includes the museum plan that has some potential to open up the back of the museum down there. It also includes some lower cost opportunities around, for example, signage and cycleway support for Te Awa that goes along there. All of these things I think can be achieved with a working group that is open-minded, willing to discuss and really debate the hard issues, put aside their personal preferences and really listen to what other people are saying as well. And I think you've got a good group of people to do that, and I know that many of you other councillors will also attend to participate in some way. So I feel quite confident that we'll do a good job of managing this initial sum of money, and that we'll start to clarify what might be priorities. Even though that's not part of the recommendation, we will start, in our thinking, to prioritise some future direction within the broader scope of the river plan. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure a lot of the public are looking forward to hearing what we come up with on their behalf. Thank you. So now vote. Okay. Martin, can you vote, please? Yeah.
The motion is carried, 10 for, 1 against.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Mallett has already given his apologies. He needs to leave at this time. Thank you for staying for that item. That moves us on to item 11, which is the options for reporting on the sustainability actions. Yes, you need to make some comments. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This report is a follow-up on a request from this committee that we come back and discuss some options reporting on how we report sustainability outcomes and actions. We have looked at a range of ways of doing that. With 5 options. In all cases, we have suggested that we continue to do the stock take that we have now done for 2 years, where we go and ask the staff what they're actually doing. So that's very much a quantitative approach. We ask them what they're doing to give us an indication. But we also want to supplement that with some reporting that gives us an indication of what is the impact of what we're doing. So it's being able to measure the sustainability outcomes across some data to give us an indication. Council has no dedicated sustainability team. We do lots of things, but none of us are actually sustainability experts. And so what we've suggested is option 3 is our recommended option, which allows us to partner with the regional council. And for them, they currently do a Waikato progress report on sustainability. And because of the level of that data, they can regenerate that report for us focused on Hamilton City. And so we're suggesting we partner with them, and so that we can produce a set of sustainability indicators that are about Hamilton City, and then our community can also see and compare those across the Waikato as well. We would still in-house do a corporate type scorecard, which is really, as a business or an organisation, what do we spend on electricity, water and waste as a business, not our community facilities, and then continue to do the stock take. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, councillors, questions? Councillor Gallagher.
The work of the previously constituted sustainability panel, where does that fit with this work?
So the sustainability panel work led us to the development of the sustainability principles, which is what we report against. So when we go and talk to the business about what we're doing, we do that in relation to those sustainability principles. We have also adopted those sustainability principles into our decision-making processes. So they're included in the procurement process, They're included in our, they will be included in our new council reporting template. They're included in our asset management plans. So we've adopted those principles so sustainability becomes something people consider when they're looking at things rather than an external thing. So this work builds off the good work that they've done, and now we're just putting the last bit of reporting on there. We've we've also talked to Wayne and Annie, and they are happy to look at what we come up with and give us some feedback as well.
Because what I want to relate is whether you call it an advisory group or an external type task force, you know, you're looking at your models. Your model seems to exclude some external audit process. So I'm looking at the role of what I understood to be the Sustainability Panel's work task force chaired by Dr Cartwright and Jeanette Fitzsimons, and also given that we also have an organisation called Sustainable Waikato, which is a collection basically of some people who have got some significant creds in the broader area, and I'm wanting to just ask you what you think about how we should engage with some kind of task group or some external review group that would review what we're doing. It seems to me, if I could say, I have a reservation that we're just going to use Waikato Regional Council, which seems to be a fellow colleague in local government, as against, if you take my point, an external audit.
What we're going to use is Waikato Regional Council's expert knowledge. So they have a range of sustainability indicators that they have developed that use national benchmarks and are recognised as the appropriate type of benchmarks to measure sustainability against. And rather than us go out and duplicate that work, what we're saying is we should partner with them and use their scientists and their knowledge to apply that here. They will build the model for us and manage the data, and so that means that rather than having someone audit what we do, we will be using credible data to start with, so we won't need that to be audited. It'll be independent data that will be going into that model.
In preparing this report, who outside council have staff spoken with? And I'm going back obviously to the expertise that was gathered on that sustainability panel, for example. Have we talked to them?
So we've talked to Wayne and Annie, who were on the panel.
Right.
Yep.
Yep.
We have also talked to a number of organisations, including
Deloitte, PwC, KPMG.
Yep. About options around this area. Oh, sorry.
Deloitte, KPMG, and PwC, some accounting firms.
They do have sustainability departments. So we have talked to them and also to Catalyst?
Yes, Catalyst.
Catalyst. So Catalyst, another organisation that does sustainability reporting.
What about our university? What about people like Professor Clark's and members, the original members of the Sustainable Panel? Have you spoken to them?
Not about the reporting requirements, no.
Just the final question I have is on 5. You know, we've got the option of stock take plus sustainability scorecard, which is monitored externally. You don't favour that option. Why would that be? I'm looking at, you know, we have, for example, if I think I've got this right, we have an audit and risk committee where we have external people coming in auditing this organisation in terms of our financial and risk registers and parameters, but you don't seem to be proposing a sort of an external type of monitor for our sustainability as an organisation and even to advisors as a city.
Two things. We are proposing external advice, which is coming from the Regional Council. So they do have experts in various areas, so we want to use their expert knowledge. And the other reason we don't propose option 5 is a cost reason. It will cost significantly more to take that option, whereas we can get equally credible advice from the Regional Council with their sustainability experts at a lot less cost.
Within our existing budget.
Yeah, within our existing budget.
Yes, thanks. I'm extremely uncomfortable about the proposal here. Having worked with the Regional Council for many years, I think they do some excellent work in their areas, but I'm concerned that they don't do work in all the areas we operate in. I'm wondering why we haven't sort of referred this back for a discussion at a briefing session before coming here, because I would like, as a elected member, to be able to participate in a bit of a discussion that's not sort of a final report here. So I wonder, that's one question, is why haven't we had that sort of discussion? There's some issues such as rainwater collection, use of renewable energy, diversion of household waste, not on a macro scale, but looking at individual households in different areas, and there's a number of bits of work in there that are not areas that the Regional Council specifically works in, and there's some that they do work in that don't seem to be measured, like the use of public transport and active transport as opposed to cars. Can you tell me how we're going to, if we use the Regional Council who don't work in some of those areas, how they could devise the best set of indicators for us, when perhaps we might know just as well, if not better, the indicators that we need to follow?
Yep, so on page 101 of the report.
Yeah, I'm on that.
Yep, we've listed the indicators are the ones that are being used by the Regional Council, and for example waste, we have added down there that that's the last indicator on the page, that the national data isn't collected at territorial level, but we do collect that data, and we would then use the data that we have available to populate that. The focus of these indicators are around the impact on our environment, so things that don't align to the principles as such as impacts on our environment, we wouldn't report through this monitor. We would most probably report them in another way through to council. For example, if I just use the transport example, we report that back through your Access Hamilton strategy.
Well, I thought the purpose, was it not, of the sustainability indicators was it was a set of information or data that would show us how we're doing across the board, rather than bits and pieces happening in different areas.
So agree that you're talking about a wider sustainability approach. This report was specifically to come back about the principles that have been developed.
And we're talking about the Regional Council, who doesn't operate at sort of territorial level, designing those indicators for us.
The indicators that we're talking about are collected across the country, usually through national organisations like NIWA, and so the Regional Council takes that and puts it on a web page effectively, and that comes down to territorial level. So we could get them, what we're proposing is that they set a progress monitor like they have, but for us, and then they manage the population of that data for us.
Yeah, we had an expert panel, sustainability panel, for 4 years, devising a set, sort of an area, the areas they felt we should be focusing on for Hamilton City, did we not? And, I just don't understand why we're not using that group or the report, I don't remember the exact list, but I know it included some of the things I talked about before, with why we're not using them to devise the performance measure, or things we should be getting performance measures sorted out for.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor, I can't answer that. I don't have the knowledge.
Well, why are we going to the Regional Council and not to our own group that we used for that length of time?
So, Councillor McPherson, the sustainability panel doesn't exist as an entity anymore.
Yeah, I know that, Sean, but I'm asking why we didn't go to them. I didn't say resurrect them. We could have got, we spoke to 2 of them. We didn't speak to the chair or another person, Professor Clarkson, we've done a lot of work with before, as Martin mentioned.
So the panel, the makeup of the panel, the last, before it was, I guess, officially disbanded. So Jeanette Fitzsimons hadn't been on the panel. She had opted out of the panel prior to that finishing, because of other commitments. So the panel was essentially Dr. Cartwright and Annie Perkins. So they're the two people that Julie's referred to that we have spoken to this time round. So they were essentially the two remaining members of that former panel.
But Sean, did not that panel, whoever was on it right at the end, because I know I can recall Jeanette Fitzsimons being to at least 3 meetings here at council, sitting there at the table, reporting to us, did not they devise a set of issues we should be measuring our sustainability against?
I can't recall.
I'm not talking about the quantities. I'm talking about the points that we should be devising a measurement for, I guess.
Yeah, I guess why I'm hesitating is I'm not entirely sure where that panel ended up on what they thought about those measures. I know the panel was somewhat critical of the strategy that we had developed, and when Jeanette presented, they did speak about some of the issues they saw with that. So it's not that we sort of inherited a strategy and a scorecard which was essentially everyone was happy with, because they weren't, and they were reasonably kind of critical of what we had done.
Well,
that was the genesis of developing those principles, which again that panel was
They were saying we should be including all of their points, and we're only including some of them in our strategy, to put it broadly. But now we're devising a new sort of strategy, which is, or we are saying, well, the regional council, you devise one for us and we'll measure ourselves against it. It's sort of like, it seems to me, a bit reinventing the wheel.
I guess we're not. I guess the council decided not to have a So the council made a resolution to retire the sustainability strategy and to instead adopt the set of principles, which has happened.
The last council, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And then the reporting back to council was to be an annual stock take of activity that council was undertaking, and that's happening. And then from this committee in February, it was actually a resolution to bring back a proposal for how we're going to report on the effect that those actions are having. So it's not and that is what Julie's presenting now, is actually, we sort of recognise internally that we don't have that expertise, which is why Ricky and Julie have talked to a number of external parties.
Have you talked to any elected members as part of that?
So this had a narrow scope when I came on board.
Sorry?
If it helps, when I came on board and I asked staff about this, it had the narrow scope that you're talking about. It had gone from, you used to have a broader sustainability policy approach, and you went to a sustainability stock take. So the only conversation we've had is, what did that sustainability stock take require, and how would be the best way to monitor and report on that? That's all. So you're raising a lot of pertinent sustainability arguments, Councillor McPherson. You really are, and I have some sympathy for some of those things like transport. But that was outside of the scope of the work that the staff are bringing here today.
Well, I don't recall it being outside of the scope of the things we talked about whenever we've discussed sustainability. Public transport, for one, was always in the scope of the discussions.
Well, this is based off a recommendation of previous council.
My question to Sean was that discussed with any elected members?
At what time? Since the decision was made from the previous council?
Between the February meeting and now. That's what I'm asking about, because I don't feel, personally, and I'll speak to this later, I don't feel this reflects necessarily the views of the majority of the community members about how we should approach the issue. And I'll be saying, I'm saying now, that I felt that there's some reference group of elected members might have helped with that.
Yeah, so you're entitled to that point of view, and what I'm saying is the only discussion that's been had has been a very narrow one, is how do we report on the sustainability stock take, as was decided by the previous council. Now, if things have changed since the previous council, and this council wants to widen out or have a discussion of some sort, then I'm in the hands of council about that. But you, just to answer your question is no, we only discussed what would be the most cost-effective way of delivering on the sustainability stock take. That was the only discussion Philip and I were party to at all. Okay?
I'd like to challenge the issue of cost too, but you can't do that in a meeting like this, which is why I asked whether they'd thought about it coming to a briefing, because I think you could have more easily challenged the issue of cost and what sort of work might be involved, what was really important to council, what wasn't, what are the key points that we should be looking at and things like that.
Yep. Okay, so that's an idea that you raise, and let's see what other people think of that. I mean, I'm not opposed to it myself. We haven't spent staff have been working on this, and I do actually think Environment Waikato Regional Council does have a lot of national data that's useful, and why replicate. Having said that, but if this should be broader and contain some other wishes of council, that's a conversation that I'm happy to have and to take to another forum. Let's go through the rest of the questions, and then Dave, see if we can come back to that. Councillor, is that all right if we come back to that?
Yep. I'll have an amendment too.
Yep, that's fine. Councillor Henry?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I was a bit slightly challenged on that too, because like Councillor McPherson said, it's a little bit of a different kettle of fish, the regional council and us, and also I just heard in the past there was, because of that panel, there was a report and with some wonderful recommendations, but it's gone in some drawer somewhere. And I don't know, look, that's just what I heard. So I'm just wondering, and the other thing that also, you said in the risk, that there was a couple of things that we are not, the measures we're doing of council, we're not as good corporate citizens. There's just some words that are in there that just bring up red flags for me, and the risk at the end. And I think, can we be more, that we do it more, set up something just like I think I already asked it, that we can set up something here with some outside people that that have been mentioned before, to talk about that we're more specific.
So just look,
I don't know whether that's a good.
Just to see if this is helpful, I'm not going to stop Mayor King having his question either, but just to suggest that perhaps what we do is we receive the report, and then because we really couldn't give due justice to a discussion on this today, we lay that part of it on the table and we bring it to a workshop and we allow some discussion to occur, and that will pick up your wishes that you might bring to a resolution. I think that might be a useful way forward. Okay, everyone seems to be nodding. Mayor King, have you got anything additional you want to say?
Can I just ask one more question? I wanted one more question.
Sorry.
February was options to come back, but we've come back with a staff recommendation of an outcome, and that wasn't what was asked for.
Okay, so look, that will be all dealt with, and I'm just receiving the report, taking the feedback. Sorry, I will allow you another question because it might inform that, and then we'll sort of route.
Well, there should be a fee then to refer the matter to a council briefing session to consider the issues.
That's my intention. Question, Councillor?
Yeah, sure. And that's on the stock take, because you're doing a stock take on the waste. I just heard, and I hopefully you can correct me on that one, that all the leaves that are picked up all over the city are going down to Hampton Downs. Is that right?
I can't answer that, Lance. Can you?
I'm not sure.
No.
Can you check that? Because there would be a terrible waste.
We do tons of mulching as well.
So. Well, that's what just a friend of mine told me, that she asked the truck driver, and he said it goes to Hampton Downs. So, just checking.
He's not racing his truck.
Just checking.
Okay, so let's wrap up this conversation. I don't know as we need a whole deal of discussion unless there's points not being raised, because what we're doing is receiving the report and referring it back to another session. What's the wording we've landed on, please? To refer to the matter to a future elected members' briefing session. Okay? Right?
To consider the issues raised by this report.
Yeah, that's the intention.
I want to make it very brief. You're now in debate. We're now changed it. You've
Yep,
moved,
so hang
Madam
on,
Chair.
hang on, it's not
Sorry.
been moved, but yeah, let me just get it
Well
up.
done.
Brilliant. Have we got a mover? Mover? It's just saying that we received the report, refer the matter back to an elected member's briefing. Thank you, mover Councillor Bunting. Are you seconding Councillor McPherson? Yeah. Thank you. Martin?
Right, thank you. Look, I think what I want also for that briefing session and for the benefit of newly elected members, could you just perhaps give a bit of a historical context of the membership and the work of the sustainability panel? I think that's very important. I think as a member of the previous council, the way in which we processed their work was not stellar. It was not brilliant, frankly, and I think it could have been really improved. The other thing which I will be discussing at a workshop is why, and this is why do I go to PwC or this accountant firm or that accountant firm when we have the University of Waikato and we have world-renowned people in their field, and I want to see how we engage with people of incredible academic mana and expertise, etc., etc. So I just want to sort of tease it out. We've obviously had the sustainability panel. We have a group called Sustainability Waikato, but where I'm going is just as I said before, we have a audit and risk committee that gives that external sort of has some external participation. I am looking at a good external, robust monitoring of what we do, not just as a council, but as a city. And I'm not quite sure whether the answer necessarily is going to officers of another wing of government, which in this case is Waikato Regional Council. I am in no way detracting from the professional expertise of people employed by the Regional Council. I'm not quite sure if that is the area where we would go. So I think that's kind of some of the things I'd like to discuss at the workshop if I could.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the vote. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Do you want to speak to it? There's no vote up at the moment. What's it? Sorry, go to the vote. Thank you. And go. Sorry, you should have waved at me, Councillor Bunting.
The motion is passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we're on to item 12, which is the Hamilton City Central City Safety Plan. Yeah.
Yep. Good afternoon, councillors. A briefing was provided on the 13th of April about the Central City Safety Plan, and guidance was provided at that session that a task force should be set up to review the plan and create a new plan, basically. So this report is just formalising the terms of reference and the membership of that task force.
And probably just to refresh elected members' memories, I think the discussion at the briefing was around Councillor O'Leary and Councillors Jeff, James and Mark, I think, being on the working party. That's we put in there 3 councillors, but my recollection was they were the 3 councillors that were mentioned at that meeting, notwithstanding the fact there was a couple of elected members missing from that briefing as well.
Okay, so the names to go in are?
It was Councillor Jeff, Councillor James and Councillor Mark was my recollection, but
yep.
Hopefully that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, so it didn't have Councillor Bunting in, but we are putting him in. That's been discussed. Yeah, so that's been discussed. Can I just ask a question? I'll probably take a close interest in this and I'll look forward to the work that you guys do. I am assured by Mayor King that any changes to the alcohol issues and nighttime behaviour are excluded from this, and that we are having, so this doesn't deal with that set of behaviour at this point in time? Is that?
Changed to clearly say that, like, review the effectiveness of the current plan around antisocial behaviour, vagrancy, begging and homelessness.
Okay. Angela?
So we in discussion with the Mayor, we were, and to sharpen up that scope on page 107 of the terms of reference, just where it says draft a new plan that details council's role to address the issues with a focus on antisocial behaviour, because that picks up those concerns that he's just raised.
Cool. Just knowing where different elements are picked up, because I have some concerns, like many of my colleagues, around the nighttime behaviour as well, which dovetails into some of our discussions around alcohol and access to and those kinds of things. Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Do we need to broaden this? Do we need to tighten this up more and actually say it doesn't include the bar? You know, because I mean, we're very specific that we've got our alcohol policy before basically a court now, and they're coming back with their ruling, and then this council has talked about then addressing the alcohol policy. So I think, do we need to tighten up the scope to say that this doesn't include the alcohol policy?
Let's get a comment from staff on that. Calvin, did you want to say? Did you want to say so? Yes, I'm sure you do.
The provisional policy won't be before the hearing until the 5th or 3rd quarter this year.
Yeah, yeah. But this task force wasn't supposed to be looking at the alcohol policy. No. And do we need to say that in the terms of reference so it's very clear? Because there will be
No, because there might be, I'm getting a shake of the head that I'm responding to.
No, I don't think it does. The alcohol policy has a very strict process through ALA and then back through council and then through a process. So that is quite, the development of that policy is quite separate to this, which is more initiative based with stakeholders. So no, I don't think you need to steep it out as such.
I think if I can help in discussion with the mayor and staff on after that briefing, is alcohol, and I hear what you're saying, I had the same concerns, but alcohol is actually a known issue, and it's a national issue that we deal with, and this focus of this review of this plan and possibly a new plan is Hamilton based, so it's unique in that aspect, and that was the advice from staff, to keep alcohol out. And alcohol is a huge issue, and not to be confused, I don't think.
Just from my perspective, I just want to know when, where those nighttime behaviours that we're all concerned about will be, so that I can keep, hearing the conversation about that. I don't want to be on this group, but because I've got enough on, but I do want to input into any discussion around that. That's all I want to make clear. Please. Thank you. So any other questions, comments? Oh, hang on, I haven't got the right tab up. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, I have a question about just the makeup of the task force, particularly in terms of external people. I see we've got a couple of people there from the People's Project. Given that there's been discussions over the last 6 months from some councillors about issues in the CBD and concerns raised about responsiveness of police in dealing with CBD issues, and indeed communication with police, why would we not have a police representative on the task force? I would have thought it would make good sense.
Initially, that was in the task force, the police, the DHB, People's Project, Department of Corrections, because all of those people also sit on the People's Project governance group. But in discussions with the Mayor, he is of the view that the group needs to be small, and it is easier to manage small groups. So that was merely the recommendation that way. But also actually when the task force, it was my intention as chair to cover that off when the task force gets to certain points along the way, because we've got till October, I think, that we would bring those people in at that point and then say, look, we've got to hear, what do you think, what's your responses, and then we get fresh eyes and use them sort of as a focus group contributing, and often that way actually, in my experience, you get better outcomes.
Can I just follow that up? Thank you. It just seems to me that given communication issues that we have definitely had, it seems like a golden opportunity to involve the police early on to ensure that we get something tangibly different from the last plan. Otherwise, I fear we're sort of we're possibly going to head down the same track and get the same sort of plan. And I just think it is definitely an issue, and it just seems like a golden opportunity to get them in at the ground floor and get a new relationship going in terms of the CBD.
We have got a name that we can bring in, but it's a junior policeman, and we believe that once we get to a certain point, and I believe the result of this group is very focused on sorting out this antisocial behaviour, at that stage we need to come in to the highest level and then work back down. And I believe if we start with more of a junior, we're not going to get the result we want.
So why are we being given a junior? I mean, this is an important issue. Why aren't we dealing with someone higher up?
Because I don't believe it would be fair to bring in the area commissioner right from the start when we're working through and ensuring that we've got the social aspects of this policy in place before we start looking at the enforcement side of the policy. And as soon as we get to the enforcement side of the policy, at that point, I believe we need to bring the police in, where we know we've covered off everything else on the social side.
So, just question follow up on that. Does the senior police in charge are they not suggesting someone that they feel comfortable with? I mean, their rank within the police is for their own business, but does the commissioner not recommend one of his staff to?
We can get somebody in if that's what this group decides, but I believe in an organisation you start at the top and come down, and at that point we need to get buy-in from the area commander, and then he will appoint people down the chain who will report back up to him. But
okay, so maybe that's maybe a just for you to ponder on. It might be a point for debate or a point for an amendment that's for you to consider. I guess the question has been answered, eh?
Involved that we thought we could bring in as the policy evolved, but there's a social aspect we've got to ensure is covered off first.
But wouldn't the police want to be involved in the social aspect as well? I must be missing something here. It just seems to be because a fundamental issue we seem to have is a disconnect. Here was a chance to connect. That's where I'm a little bit lost.
Okay, so your question's been answered. Let's consider that for the aspect of debate. Have you got any other questions, Councillor Taylor?
No, that's all for now, thanks.
So I have next Councillor Casson. This is just questions.
Yep, questions. Look, mine was on the same vein as Councillor Jeff. Were you saying, Mayor Andrew, that the police have offered us a junior member, or?
Well, at the previous meeting, the person who was indicated, I don't know how junior she was, but she certainly wasn't the senior person. Yeah. And I thought that with the senior person appointing someone to feed up through the chain would be, look, to start with, there's things like, are they on the right benefit? Should they be taken off the streets by, and I'm getting way ahead of the group here, but taken off the group because they're not stable? Have they got a home? These types of things, cover those off, know the list of people who we're dealing with, and then at that point there, the group can consider whether they want to take a harder line. And at that point there is the involvement of the police, and I would like to see that start at the very top and work down, so there's no question about having support from the top, and to have a senior police person in here while we're sorting out these social things first to ensure they're in place over the first few meetings, I don't think we...
So I think you've done well to answer the question.
Yeah.
Do staff have a comment on the in response to the question of Jeff and James? Do staff have a point of view on that?
I think the thing to emphasise is that the initial part of the group is going to be discussing what council can provide in this space, and I think what the Mayor has said is correct, that we actually need to sort out what that is, what the council response is, before we go out to our collaborative partners, because we can't tell the police what to do. So it's about sorting out what we can bring to the table and then going to collaborate at that point.
Mm.
Okay.
But
I might make some comments on that later.
Just with my experience, you'd have to have the police involved at the very beginning, because you could come up with all sorts of plans that could be absolutely stupid that they don't agree with, and you've gone down that path for nothing. But my other, so we'll deal with that, and obviously.
So we'll get to that in debate. Questions.
Yeah. So why?
Right now, I'm happy to include police if that's what this group decides. It's not. This isn't for me. I'm quite open on it. If that's what you around this table decide you want, and there's the DHB we can bring in as well. There's police we can bring in right from the start. There's a list of other people who we could bring in right from the start, and I've got no issue with that if that's what the group thinks is appropriate.
We left. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Hey, we left the Revenue Task Force with 2 vacant positions where we didn't appoint anyone specifically at that point in time, because we know that depending on the topic, we'll have to bring in experts from time to time. And it may be that you want to bring police in right from the get-go for everything, or maybe there's other bodies that you want to bring in later on down the track. So there's the option, the Mayor, you're suggesting, Councillor Taylor, you bring you label one as a cop police now, or you leave it as a member to be appointed by the task force later on, depending on the needs as the task force works through it. So you can build any level of flexibility into this as you choose, right from the get-go now if you wish to.
Okay, so we'll get to the solution. I hear some willingness to change, so we'll get there. Let's just skip to the questions.
Second question is, second question is, I've heard people say that you're not including alcohol in the safety plan, but why aren't we? Because you might as well just call it a day safety plan, because antisocial behaviour happens at any time of the day and night, and it's fuelled at night time by alcohol. And if you're going to have a safety plan that doesn't include alcohol, you might as well just say it's between the hours of 6 and 6, really, because otherwise you've got a safety plan that's just a day plan. And there's a night plan because, like I said, antisocial behaviour is fuelled by alcohol at night time, so it has to include night time as well,
so let's just
would include alcohol.
Let's get the question answered, why that was decided. Calvin, do you want to have another go at that?
Yeah, no, so the answer wasn't, from the staff point of view, wasn't that alcohol shouldn't be included, it was that the provision of the policy should be separate. The task force, again, I think the chair has said that if you want to bring that to debate to be included within a task force, then feel free to debate that. But it's about, what we said was, don't include the policy discussion around the local alcohol policy, because that has a very set process within this task force. You may wish to talk about the behaviours associated with alcohol provision within the city at times and dates. That's entirely your view.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to include alcohol policies or anything, but I think alcohol should be included because, you know, it fuels antisocial. So then it goes around to police should be included as well with that.
Okay, so that's for the debate, if we don't mind.
And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henry?
Yeah, I was at that meeting, City Safe meeting, and I just want to clarify. So will we get when the meetings are happening, so even the people that are not on the task force, so we can attend? Is that right? Can we do that?
Richard has assured us for all of these types of groups that everyone will get calendar given the dates in their calendars to respond to if they want.
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. We like the way you answer the question straight to the point. There. Councillor, have you finished? Councillor McPherson.
Oh, yeah, no, well, my question, thanks, Dave. My question was around the police thing, but at what point in the, I seek your guidance, Madam Chair, about what point we try to inject police into the terms of reference into this? Is it during debate or is it now or when?
You can.
Guys, yeah, that would
I'm
be-
just
yeah.
crafting up a couple.
Can we do that at the time?
Well,
Yes, you
I know, I
can be
just wanna
helpful.
help
No,
Councillor
I want
Bunting.
to do that at the time when we get into deliberations. I just want questions for clarity at the moment. But I think what you're doing is going to be very helpful. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah, but-
that doesn't answer my question. I'd
No.
quite like to hear that, with respect.
Plus 3 externals to be appointed. Because that was originally the plan.
Yeah.
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 Does that include police specifically? Yep.
If you want it to.
But that's quite a different thing, Mary Andrew. I think there's a mood around the table at this stage to include police right from the initial get-go, which we can bring up in debate later on. But is that acceptable to the people who are moving the motion?
Look, that was the original plan, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to get there. I was going to ask where we land on that shortly.
Right.
I just wanted to get through the questions. That was all.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 6 and 2 3. So Councillor McPherson.
Right, thanks. My question is also about the membership of the task force, but a different area from what's been discussed already. I would like to understand the rationale of 2 people from the People's Project when some other organisations that work with homeless and people with problem behaviours in the central city aren't included. And I'm talking about, for instance, there's more than just them, the men's shelter and the Methodist City Services, or whatever, Methodist City Mission, whatever they're called, do quite a lot of work in that area. I've always been a little bit uncomfortable about the reliance on the People's Project, not about the inclusion of them, but the reliance on them alone in the social services area, because I'm well aware from my work in that area in the past that there's a heck of a lot more than just that's happening.
Oh, thank you. Do you want Angela to answer that, or staff?
I don't know who's supposed to answer why there's 2 of them and none of the others.
Right. Comment from anyone that wants to address that question?
I think there's just a lot of groups that could be included, so it's just a matter of keeping the numbers down at this stage.
Okay, how's this for a thing? One People's Project and one other to be selected by the group from the social services area or something like that, if you're worried about numbers, or it could be just 2 to be selected from the social services area and let them put them all in the ring together and see who wins. It's the 2 that win.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting there.
Well, I'm talking. My question relates to the rest of the social services area work.
Yeah. So we'll explore if there's a willingness to capture that in the thing. Councillor King. Question? Oh, sorry, Mayor King.
It's fine. How are you?
It's all right. 6 months ago was one.
Angela, we just need to bring in the antisocial behaviour into terms of reference, and do we need to Chief Exec, do we need to reference that in the motion, or can we just change the terms of reference, the scope?
I think you should reference it in the resolution.
So
Okay.
it's with a new plan that details council's role to address the issues with a focus on antisocial behaviour.
Yeah.
And then the terms of reference, my suggestion would be then you just list the People's Project. I don't know, Dave, is that a social agency?
Sorry, I wasn't listening to that bit, sorry.
Oh, is it up there? Social. How do we pick up Dave's?
Yeah, the membership include 1 person from the People's Project and 1 person from another social agency.
Relevant.
Another social agency, police. Look, originally I had DHB because they deal with mental health, but Dave, they might be able to be picked up through the social agency and the People's Project actually to cover that
I know
off.
the mental health part of the DHB actually thinks that they're well served in the main by the People's Project.
Okay.
In their case.
All right.
Cool. It looks like we're making progress then.
Yeah.
Wonder if we should put another relevant social agency just to keep it within that context, but it's all good. So, and the police. Yes? We haven't got a mover or a seconder yet, so we're drafting on the hoof. Yeah, you're moving it? Councillor O'Leary will move. And do we have a seconder? Oh, we do. We have Councillor Bunting. A second. Okay, so if all your questions are answered, and we've made some progress in redrafting, tweaking the motion, we'll go into debate and we'll allow Angela, of course, as the mover, to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I guess the terms of reference are quite specific, in that the task force will have two tasks, and that is to review the effectiveness of the Central City Safety Plan that was adopted in 2014, and that finishes this year, and to then decide what falls out of that. And I have some ideas of what we still need to tackle, as do other members, and then how we move forward. And I'm sensing that will probably be a new plan, and I think that would be really appropriate. And also the other thing that will come out of this is in July, reporting back to, I don't know if it's this committee, sort of separately, is the final scorecard, isn't it, for the current plan. So at some point the task force will get to look at that as well. But it's really important that we, at least when we start this, that we review the effectiveness of the first plan, because I think there may be some perceptions out there that may or may not be right, and getting information obviously is really good. So yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the views around the table.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor, well, the seconder is Councillor Bunting. Would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the group for including me in the task force, something I'm pretty passionate about. So I'm excited to be involved with this. And I'd also like to speak about the police being involved from the start. Just to elaborate on that point, I don't think we can separate social and enforcement. I think it's all one, and I don't think there's many police who would think the same either. I think they see the same as effective. So rather than run to the police with our ideas, it's going to be great to have them involved at the start. I'm really excited about, this is an ever-evolving problem, and I'm really excited about being a part of the solution, so I think I'll stop right now.
Thank you very much. Councillor Casson.
Yeah. Look, like all plans, the Central City Safety Plan has to adapt and be reviewed and changed to keep up with our changing society and the intricacies and challenges that we face. Put into the mix our ever-present vagrants who fight, swear, drink, take drugs, beg, urinate, and generally cause a nuisance to general public, city workers and storekeepers as well. Look, add into the mix the drunken idiots that run our police ragged during the late night and early mornings. Then, like any large city, we have our problems. Don't get me wrong, I think our city safe people that are employed by HCC do an amazing job with very limited powers. So do our frontline police with very limited resourcing. But for far too long, I think council and police have had their heads in the sand, either thinking the problem will just fade away or it's just pretend it's not there, which it is. Our public have to feel safe when they come into town. Our store and office workers should not have to put up with antisocial behaviours going to work, leaving work or having a meal break. More has to be done and new initiatives have to be found. To have an effective Hamilton Central City Safety Plan task force, you have to have people on it that will want to effect change, people who have experience in dealing with all walks of life, and in some cases, people who have the ability to be as hard as nails and uncompromising on that task force when it comes to people's safety. And I don't apologise because I'm one of those people. I can be very uncompromising and hard as nails when I want to be. So look, I don't like wishy-washy, I don't like warm fluffies. Let's have a decent look at the city plan and get it going, and let's make the city safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, when James started talking about all the problems in the past, the social issues we had to deal with, I thought he was talking about the council from the early 2000s. It certainly sounded like it. Jeff will remember. But fortunately, we've dealt with those homelessness problems. People staying late at night to finish the alcohol cupboard off. Look, I just want to talk about one aspect. That I'm uncomfortable a little bit with the way this council has sort of picked a group at times, and we've done this in the youth area with Zeal, that operates in the central city, a relatively recent group coming in, who are doing good work, but they're well funded, well connected, and have the ear of government. They obviously haven't criticised the government, or they would have had their funding cut, like has been threatened recently. There are other groups that beaver away in the background and don't seek a lot of publicity, just do the job. And I mentioned a couple of them before, I'll mention them again: the Methodist City Mission, the Men's Shelter. Just in the last 5 minutes, I've had a text from the Men's Shelter, who are obviously watching this debate and thanking me for mentioning them. It's not just them, there's a whole lot of other groups that do work in this area, and I think we sometimes focus too much on the stars and not thinking about what's actually happening on the ground. The people that do the meals at evenings, they've got some very good points about the work they do as well. They've only just formed a regular organisation in the last couple of years. But we need to make sure that we're getting out there and getting the feel of all of them when we're dealing with this as well, because sometimes they have intelligence on the people that we're concerned about, and sometimes they have solutions as well, short-term and long-term, that others may not have. And I'd just like to see us of a mindset that includes not just the People's Projects and Zeals of the world, even the police, but also some of the wider agencies and people that are around the place that really know what's going on. And those problems are not, that are in the central, that we see manifest themselves in the central city, and not just problems of the central city, they're problems of the whole city, because, you know, it's been talked about before, you push out the homeless without giving them homes in the central city, they're going to be homeless somewhere else in the area surrounding the central city. So you've got to look at the holistic solutions, and I know the People's Project and others are doing that, but so are other groups, and they've been doing that for a long time, and often on the smell of an oily rag. So we just need to make sure that we're capturing input from that part of the sector as well.
Thank you. Mayor King.
Yeah, I think we need to ensure that these people are looked after by the various agencies that they come under. But I also believe that the resolve of this group is very different from what we've seen in the last council. And this group, this task force, I believe, will actually follow through further than the social aspect, and will actually step up and put themselves out there and actually take the hard steps to clean up the antisocial behaviour that we're seeing on our streets. These people make us feel uncomfortable, and that's not the way, that's around the wrong way. They're the ones who should be uncomfortable. They're being housed. We know there's only 2 people in our city who are choosing to be homeless. They're being looked after, they're on benefits. We know sometimes they do need mental health help, and we need to ensure that they do get that. But at that stage on, we do need to take a harder line, and I believe that this task force is prepared to actually step up and do that after we've ensured that their social needs have been looked after. So I'm quite excited about this, and I think that Angela will do a very good job leading this team with connecting in with the different groups that she already has relationship with. Thank you.
You stole some of my words there, Mayor King. It's okay. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, just picking up with the point of Councillor McPherson, I hope, obviously, the task force will engage with some key groups, even though they not be members of the task force, because there's incredible expertise out there. And also, I think the choice of Councillor Leary as the chair is a very good one, because she, as you know, has a very long track record in terms of her interactions with the business community, but also with some of the social issues on the ground. So I think the composition of the committee personally is very good. And Angela and your team, I wish you well.
Thank you. It's one of the difficulties of being last speaker is you find, second to last because you get your right to reply, is that you find that people have said a lot of what you want to say. And I think this is very exciting because I know that everybody who's on this group has put their hand up for this willingly and with great passion to achieve a common outcome, which is we want to increase the safety and the social solutions for all people in the city. And some of the people that are causing us concern are people with very high needs themselves and need to be taken care of as citizens of this city as well. But I think we can get there because I think you've got a good balance, and I certainly think that Angela is the right chairperson for this group, having already been through phase 1 and with the People's Project, and I know that there were some ideas brimming at that time that couldn't be implemented at that time, but now the time is right to bring those forward, Angela. So I wish you all the best. I think you'll be a good group. I'll probably come along and listen from time to time. I'll certainly be taking an interest in the outcomes of this group. So, Angela, write a reply. You don't need one? Brilliant. So let's go to the vote. Voting, everyone? Okay, thank you. Oh, are we waiting? Who's not voted? Are we done? Okay,
The
thank
motion
you.
carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Look, please, can I move an extension of time? Yeah. So, Councillor O'Leary, would you like to move for an extension of time? And I'll second. And all in favour say aye. And look, we are getting towards the end. If we can. Oh. Okay, let's keep going. Let's move to
Into a thing at the museum, so it's work business, work.
Yeah,
You know what I mean.
that's right.
1, 2, 3.
Have we got a quorum?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, have we got a quorum?
3, 4. Mark, you.
Let's take the report.
5, 6. Yeah, you do.
They should be pretty quick.
Yep, so we're taking item 13 as read and we're going straight to questions, and then we'll quickly get into the recommendation and debate if there is any questions, please. Oh, sorry. Councillor Tooman will move it. Councillor Casson will second it. Is that what you're saying? Yep. Okay, now, if there are no questions, is there any debate? Councillor Tooman, nothing to say on it? Councillor Casson.
Sorry, I've got a question.
Correct. Let's rewind. Question. Councillor McPherson.
I had to find my page, I came back in a bit quicker, sorry. Rokura Haora Tainui is a health services provider or?
Wider social service provider.
Wider social services, okay. It's just the only reason I'm asking is there's still room there or on the park if another provider of similar services were to want to go there, because I know that at least one in that category is trying to get the use of the bowling outfit over here, and if they didn't get that, where else would they go in the city and where might be appropriate? So I'm just checking that we've got some room to grow in that out there perhaps or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So the increase of the footprint equals about a third of Enderley Park Community Centre. So the building has flex. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
No questions in the debate? Just general. Oh, good. Okay. All right. Just quickly, look, I've had a long association with Enderley Park Community Centre. It's pretty close to my heart. I first came here to Hamilton in 1992. That's where I started playing rugby for Eastern Suburbs. I had to keep one eye on the game, one eye on the car, but that was okay. But look, when the rugby moved on, it became the Enderley Park Community Centre, and my involvement continued as I was the local community constable, then I was the local community sergeant. And the centre have continued to offer the local community a fantastic facility for after-school computer classes, fitness training, kids basketball, touch, information evenings for locals, running all sorts of classes for a diverse range of ethnic groups and offering medical services as well. Look, Fairfield Enderley have their problems, as any community does, but the additional space that can house up to 8 community-based workers will be fantastic for the Enderley community, and the community can only benefit from that. The Raukura Haora Tainui have done and continue to offer an awesome service to the community of Enderley, and kia kaha to them, and long may it rain.
The motion is passed unanimously.
So I'll introduce this, Councillor Paula. I think the report's reasonably self-explanatory. Back in March, Council asked for a report to come back. I think it was around when we discussed fees and charges during the annual plan. I have to say this is a difficult space, and we try to outline in the attachments for, especially for the newer councillors, of the history of reviewing fees and charges and how we benchmark current fees and charges. And also in the body of the report itself, the piece of work we did last year looking at the contribution to council's operating costs from sports that use council land and or buildings. As the report says in points 25 through to 27, the information that we gathered at that stage wasn't completely comprehensive. I think it missed out quite a bit of the social use and social leagues of a number of sports. So we essentially used the information from Sport Waikato that was provided through registered players and to Sport Waikato. So what we're saying is that we, if we were going to go down the avenue of looking at fees and charges to look at equity across different sporting codes around getting equity and contribution to council's operating costs, then we'd have to do more work, and we'd have to talk to the sporting codes around capturing all the use by them, including social leagues and casual use and that sort of thing. So that would be a key part of that. There's a bit of work involved in that. It would need some resource for that. And the other thing is probably just to bear in mind, as we tried to outline in the report, that probably need to look at fees and charges as part of the discussion around equity and what council does for sporting codes support. Obviously, we provide facilities. We do a whole bunch of things, and it'll also be about us getting a lot more accurate on how we apportion costs to particular codes on particular types of facilities and that sort of thing. Obviously, we'd have to look at levels of service, community occupancy charges, grants and other contributions that we've made over the years and that sort of thing too. So it's a reasonably complex space, and we haven't had a lot of complaints from codes. We've had some talk to us around that, but we don't get a lot of complaints. I think you find the benchmarking information shows that council's reasonably conservative in its approach to charging, and we look at other providers in the city. That's mainly around, we've put some benchmark in there around indoor recreation, but obviously that you've got to compare indoor rec with outdoor rec, and whether it's on fields or it's on courts and things like that. So it's quite a complex space. When we've looked at this, staff have looked at this and spoken to other councils. I think a lot of councils have struggled with this too over the years, and there's probably no perfect answer to this, but so what we're saying is, yes, we could do the work. We need a bit more resource. We'd need a bit of time to do that, and if we did go down that track, we could inform coming up to the LTP around and that discussion around fees and charges in the future and that sort of thing. So we've just put the recommendation that the report be received, and we're open to feedback from elected members on that, the direction going forward.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of us with questions. I did have a question about, I didn't really understand how some of these contributions to council's operating costs were derived. You've got athletics at 541%. Is that because the costs attributed to maintain the athletics facilities are that much greater, or therefore the amount derived is greater, or why is that? 541%? I didn't even, yeah.
Yes, so this was included in the report that was presented to council last year, and it was based on the, sorry, I'm just trying to work that out myself. the operational cost being the cost of the maintenance of the athletics track, and I guess that's one of the difficulties is that we've highlighted. It's because of the way that we allocate our, or we calculate our costs isn't broken down, maintenance costs isn't broken down to clearly to a facility level. It's across the larger park. So where there's a park that has a number of codes playing on that for the purpose of this report, they divided those costs equally between those codes. So I'm assuming that's how that's been derived.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we've highlighted in the previous report.
We said that when we had that piece
Yeah.
of work done, that it wasn't comprehensive, it was just indicative that we'd have to do a lot more work.
Yeah.
But I think generally what it shows is that we've discussed before is that, yes, there's some inequity between codes, but also in there there's a long history of council working through reviewing that, and yes, it was some time ago. So I think, and that's what we're saying, is we'd have to do more work because the information wasn't as accurate as we would like if we go down a policy change or any fees and charges change.
Right. So you'd see these as flags that would inform fees and charges debate for the LTP, and that would have enough time to do that?
Yeah, and
that's right.
Some of our problems is like we run Porritt Stadium, which is part of Chedworth Park, but we have, the way our cost centres are set up is the athletics track, we don't actually break it down just what we spend on the athletics track, it's actually in a cost code for the whole park. So yes, we can do that and we can make some guesstimates and things like that, but we'd have to go through that line by line and work that out with the groundsman there.
And no basketball? Because there's no basketball in any city council facility, is that the story? So they all go into private facilities, basketball?
That shows the nonsense, to be honest, with these figures.
Okay, well, so my question is, I just didn't know, I mean, because I played basketball at the YMCA, or did before I wrecked my ankle. But, so these are only the codes that are actually operating out of, so there will be some others like lacrosse and so on, right?
Yeah, there will be.
So out of Gower Park, isn't it?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I look forward to finding out more about it, and I know we did bring it very early on late last year, but we were all quite new to those things at that stage. So that was just my questions. Thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Lance asked for some feedback. I think that table is nonsense because it doesn't actually compare things properly at all. And then, so I mean, there are some reasons for that, but there could have been a little bit more work done. One of the problems that's touched on here, but it's not identified in a. He thinks I should stay cool and not get angry. Is that social sport, lots of inverted commas because different variations of that, is not counted at all. And that's the biggest sport by far played. A lot of and give you an example, touch or volleyball or netball all run social leagues on traditional sporting arenas or courts. But they don't have membership, so they don't get counted. So the 400 people that were playing volleyball at Te Rapa Sportsdrome last night, costing the council about 50 cents per person in terms of the subsidy, according to some figures or other figures I saw last year, are not counted at all. And the couple of thousand people that play touch during summer are not counted at all in there because they're not members of they're not affiliated club members, and they don't get counted, but it's not hard to get those figures. You go to volleyball, go to touch, go to netball, we all have figures of the numbers of teams and we know how many people are in each team. Certainly on an average basis, it would be easy to work out those things. Basketball does actually sometimes use some council facilities, but usually it doesn't, but at least they should be in the measurements, so we know. I mean, I'm not even sure what they're measuring for volleyball, because they're, you know, for example, we don't use any council facility except the Te Rapa Sportsdrome, and it's only social sport. Social sport's not being measured, and that's only social sport playing this on. Don't even know where the figures come from for volleyball. That's why I just don't trust that graph. athletics paying 5 times the cost of running it. I'm sorry, I don't believe that when I know the costs of running the track at the facility out at Porritt Park. It's nothing like that. And I think hockey and gymnastics, well, I know it looks like they're paying bugger all of their costs, but in actual fact, they've spent a lot of their own money developing their own facilities. So it's looking like they're getting a free ride, and I know they're not. So this is part of the problem of a report like this, and it's not even a once over lightly, I'm afraid, Lance, and you can't base anything on that.
That's exactly what the report says, though, that we're saying that we need to do more work just because of the reasons you've brought up.
Yeah,
So,
we had different figures once that said in fact we see them in our fees and charges. To hire a rugby field for half a day was something like $60, or I might be guessing there, but a kid's rugby field, and you can tell how many games you're allowed on it, 2 games or 3 games, how many people would play, so you know what the cost per person per hour is. Then you can work that out versus basketball or volleyball if they hire Te Rapa Sports Drome, or touch if they hire a rugby field. You can work those sort of figures out. That was a much better comparison than this stuff, I would have thought. We've had them once before. I don't know why we're not using them now. This whole thing frustrates me because it's been going on for about 9 years, this sort of request for an apples with apples sort of comparison here, and I have no confidence that staff have really got on top of it. I'm sorry to say that, but I really think that we don't need to hire consultants to do that. I could get together with someone from basketball and badminton and netball, and we could probably do a quick cut figures that were more apples with apples than this, that's for sure. So that's part of my frustration. I think a couple of elected members ought to be involved in working out something that's useful to council, because this isn't.
Okay, so I think we're all agreed that, and the staff have agreed, in fact, actually set that out, that this is slightly cumbersome and unscientific way of doing it, and we've got to look at a better way of doing it. So we've agreed on that, right? And we've agreed on doing that in a way that would inform fees and charges lined up with the LTP, which would be the best time to get that all in sync. Yeah, so, I share some of your concerns and questions about it, because at the end of the line, we want to be fair to the community that uses our facilities, whether they're a sports club or they're, like you say, recreational sports people. We need to be fair in the way that we recover our costs. I'm sure we're going to get there. So the recommendation at the moment is just to... Oh, you snuck in. The recommendation is just to receive it, but have you got a question, Councillor Taylor?
And given that the recommendation is that the report be received, whether or not Councillor McPherson might want to move a additional motion, or
I'm not sure what the best one to do is to. Maybe we should call the chief executive, and he's good at moving resolutions to.
I need to make suggestions based on the great work you guys lead me down the path to achieve.
So I was going to say that the feedback is quite clear that the elected members need to find some way, but I don't think we need necessarily a recommendation to capture that, unless do we?
No, I don't think we need a recommendation. I think we take on board the feedback. One of the concerns we do have is we don't necessarily have, and maybe done previously, we don't necessarily have the systems in place to do this as a natural outcome. It should be easy. I think that's what Councillor McPherson's suggesting. It should just be a push of the button and drop the numbers out. We don't have that. It will require a significant amount of resource, and to be fair, the teams are tapped out and don't necessarily have the capacity to do so. So I need to sit down with Lance with our thinking caps on and think about some interesting ways of doing it. It might be engaging with you, Councillor McPherson, about some of your thoughts. I'd rather not have a recommendation. I'd rather just have a cup of tea conversation with you about how we can best deliver that going forward.
Probably better.
And then let's just have a conversation about it, because we're not precious. We just want to find the best way of getting this information. So I just suggest we take it down that approach. The team are really, really willing. They're very committed to doing it, but again, it's resource and bandwidth.
So let's have a first cut conversation with Councillor McPherson, potentially Councillor Mallet.
Paula being involved.
I was going to say myself. So the three of us chairs, just because it has a financial.
You can pass a recommendation about who pays a cup of tea, but apart from that, I don't think we need one.
So let's just take a professional approach to that. If anybody else has got some burning input, you know, speak up to one of us and we'll make sure that we get a meeting across that.
And I've got some ideas on how we might be able to do it, and you know, it might be something we can talk to Sport New Zealand about, providing some resource, because I don't think other councils have gone down this track too much, so it might be something that's national leading. We provide a model that can be used by others. So I think there's some different ways of looking at how we do this. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll find time to get that started. Let's
input into the LTP. Yeah.
Yep, so we can bring back a considered, you know, a well-balanced paper around looking at equity around fees and charges for the different types of codes, and then what are the implications of that, and then council can make some decisions from there.
It might be something that takes some phasing, for example, who
when
knows?
you get all that information, you may not want to make a decision from there, so. Yeah, but we've got the information.
Okay, so I think we've probably come as far as we can in that debate. Let's go to the vote. Okay. Oh, sorry, I haven't got a first mover or a seconder. Councillor Casson, Councillor Taylor is seconding it. Right, let's vote. Thank you,
The motion is
Council.
passed unanimously.